Hello, good morning. It is 7 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well.
A defiant defence, Nicolas Maduro says he's a decent man as the ousted Venezuelan Prime Minister appears in court.
Donald Trump sets his eyes on Greenland, saying he needs the territory for national security reasons.
Keir Starmer will travel to Paris later today for a meeting of the coalition of the willing, hoping to finalise Ukraine's peace deal.
Also today, should the over-70s have to take an eye test to be able to drive? We'll tell you why they might have to do so.
And there's also more snow on the way, the wintry weather looking beautiful, but it is causing travel delays across the UK.
A very good morning and welcome to the programme. Well, events following America's capture as Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro have been moving fast, and overnight that continued as Donald Trump warned that the US needs to take Greenland, in his words, for national security reasons right now.
So the US president told NBC News that he was very serious about moving ahead with a plan to take control of Greenland. So that, of course, all comes as we've got a new interim president sworn in Venezuela, that is Delcy Rodriguez. She called the capture of Nicolas Maduro a kidnapping.
But the ousted leader was defiant as he appeared in court in New York, declaring himself a decent man. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner was in court watching Maduro's appearance and sent us this report.
What a difference 3 days makes. Nicolas Maduro, snatched from the opulence of his Venezuelan palace, now being frog-marched away from one of America's most notorious prisons. From president to defendant in one long weekend. Then a breakfast-time helicopter ride into Manhattan. But this is no pleasure tour for Maduro, heading to his first court hearing. Maduro is being held alongside his wife, former First Lady Cilia Flores, seen here being removed from the helicopter after him. The world waiting to see the former Venezuelan president inside the US justice system. Maduro pleaded not guilty to charges including narco-terrorism and possessing machine guns and destructive devices. No cameras were allowed inside the courtroom, but I was in there a matter of meters from Nicolas Maduro, and it was incredibly dramatic. I heard him coming before I saw him, the jangle of his shackles as he came into the room, and he wished everyone a happy new year. He said it 3 or 4 times. He was then asked by the judge to confirm his identity, at which point Nicolas Maduro responded. He said, "I am President Nicolas Maduro Moros, President of the Republic of Venezuela. Here, kidnapped since January the 3rd, I was captured in my home in Caracas, Venezuela." The judge then interrupted him, saying, "There will be a time and a place to go into this. At this point, I only want to know one thing. Are you Nicolas Maduro Moros?" There was another astounding moment right at the end of this hearing as Maduro got up to walk out of the room. A gentleman in the public gallery stood up and addressed him directly. That man is Pedro Rojas, a Venezuelan in exile. He tells me he was imprisoned in the country in 2019 and now lives in the US. What did you say to Mr. Maduro? You stood up at the end of that hearing.
Okay, I speak English, I understand. So,
I told Nicolas Maduro Moros that he will pay, that the United States of America will bring him to justice, that starting today, 5th of January 2026, the great age of Venezuela begins.
He looked at you, didn't he, straight in the eyes. How did that feel?
Nicolas Maduro told me that he was innocent and that he was a man of God. I told him that we're also men of God, because we've never attacked the Venezuelan church, as he has done on numerous occasions.
God willing, he'll spend the rest of his days in prison. Unite with them to fight against our common enemy.
Rival protests outside court reflecting the different views Venezuelans in America have about this US intervention. Some are jubilant.
Best day of my life. of my life. It's not only what I feel, it's all Venezuela feel. That people over there is no. They are no.
Are you worried what happens to Venezuela next? That there's not much of a plan?
Venezuela will be great. Venezuela will be great because America support Venezuela.
Others are cynical.
We know that the real reason that the U.S. wants to kidnap Maduro and orchestrate the next phase of regime change is for resources. It's for oil, it's for minerals. Nothing about it is for the freedom of the Venezuelan people.
After the hearing concluded, Maduro in a motorcade was taken back to prison. His next hearing set for March. The consequences of his capture are unknown. Martha Kellner, Sky News, New York.
Martha there for us in New York. Well, across the region, leaders are asking questions about who might be next. Trump told reporters on Air Force One that Colombia was run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States. Meanwhile, Mexico doesn't escape some of the commentary over the last couple of days from the US president, who said drugs are pouring through the country and America is going to have to do something. But perhaps most notably, the semi-autonomous Danish territory Greenland was highlighted by the US president once again. He raised the prospect of annexation, citing its strategic location for defence and mineral wealth. This was the Danish Prime Minister's response yesterday.
Firstly, I believe that the American president should be taken seriously when he says that he wants Greenland. But I also want to make it clear that if the United States chooses to attack another NATO country militarily, then everything stops.
I mean, it's an extraordinary situation here. I mean, the doubling down from Donald Trump on those comments that he made over Greenland, really quite something, saying that he's serious about it. We need Greenland for national security. And that poses a big problem for, the UK and other members of NATO as well on how they react to it.
It absolutely does. And Stephen Miller, his Deputy Chief of Staff, is leader of Homeland Security, again, late last night on the TV, so just a few hours ago with the time difference, was making, the same kind of claim about Greenland explicitly soon. Two observations about the difference in the situation as relationship to Venezuela. It doesn't mean it's going to lead to a different course of action from the US president, who's very hard to predict. The first one is he's been so upfront about it. So it does actually give a bit of time for allies, European leaders, to speak to him, to urge him not to. Whereas there was this sort of crazy taken by surprise action with Venezuela. So it's already done. It's not like, therefore, you can undo it just by diplomacy. The other one is it would just be so unbelievably damaging. And again, a lot of people criticising the action in Venezuela for obvious reasons and the breaches of international law. But that is because it was increasingly being controlled by their enemies, Russia, China, even Iran, and was led by someone not democratically elected. So you do step back and wonder, would he really go ahead with that? But, the commentary on the television programmes from him and his staff does suggest so.
I mean, we should also say something very big happening in Venezuela as well. We've got the Vice President Delcy Rodriguez formally sworn in as the interim president. I guess a lot of people might be thinking, what happened to the opposition leader? The one that just won that Nobel Prize, where's she gone?
I know, and the really interesting thing on this, the Washington Post reporting yesterday was saying that President Trump didn't want to support the opposition leader because she had accepted the Nobel Peace Prize, which she'd had eyes on. And that was sort of, you roll your eyes at, God, how embarrassing, is that really driving force? And then she popped up on Fox News to say she'd be happy to share the prize, which is almost more embarrassing, you might say. Here's that comment from her last night.
Well, it hasn't happened yet, but I certainly would love to be able to personally tell him that we believe the Venezuelan people, because this is a prize of the Venezuelan people, certainly want to give it to him and share it with him. What he has done, as I said, is historic. It's a huge step towards a democratic transition.
Well, look, this is all a headache as well for the UK government. I mean, how to handle a US president ignoring all the usual rules of international diplomacy, arguably also international law as well. Keir Starmer still valiantly trying to push his domestic agenda at Cabinet. He's going to be saying tackling the cost of living will remain his focus. But look, when Donald Trump's saying he's serious about taking control of Greenland, the Danish Prime Minister saying that would collapse the NATO alliance, I mean, it feels like the UK government might need a slightly tougher response to all of this. Well, let's see what they are going to say. The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, is here to join us today.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So overnight, Donald Trump has doubled down on his threat to take over Greenland, which is currently, of course, part of Denmark. He told NBC News, "We need Greenland for national security. We need it for national security right now." What's your response?
Well, and the UK and NATO members are doubling down on support for Greenland, their right to self-determination, their place as part of the Kingdom of Denmark, and the role that they are already playing as part of the NATO alliance. The good news for President Trump is that Greenland is already part of the team and is playing its part in defending our national security as the UK and our collective security.
Because, you say there about playing its part of the team, because this is the implication of what Donald Trump is saying, suggesting that actually the US having control of Greenland would benefit Europe. We need Greenland for national security, and that includes Europe. So that's a load of rubbish then, is it?
That's not, I think, a fair characterisation of either the European collective security interest or where either the European Union or the United Kingdom and other European countries that are not part of the EU stand. We're really clear about that.
We've heard from the Danish Prime Minister, who said that if the US invades Greenland, everything stops, including NATO. Do you agree? Would that effectively lead to, the collapse of NATO?
At a time when we can see the security of NATO members and the alliance at threat, particularly from Russia, but also from our other adversaries, this is not the time to destabilise NATO and to undermine our collective security.
Is that what Donald Trump's doing?
We're really clear about where we stand. We're really clear with the United States about where we stand on Greenland. And what you've seen from the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary, not just in relation to the fast-moving events in Venezuela, but more generally when it comes to our relationship with the United States and actually diplomacy and foreign policy more generally, the Prime Minister chooses what to say, how to say it, and when to say it very carefully. And what he always has at the forefront of his mind is how does he make sure that he uses his influence and leverage in a way that, first and foremost, works to our national interest, whether economic interest or security interest, and then for the collective interest as well of global security and the rules-based system which we've seen disintegrating before our eyes.
Just reading between the lines of what you're saying there, we've got, of course, that really important meeting on Ukraine, which the US is a big part of. Europe needs the US, let's be honest. Is this partly why you've got to be so careful when it comes to criticising him on Greenland, on Venezuela?
Well, this is just the nature of diplomacy. And look, there are some countries, indeed there are some colleagues who are out stridently criticising the United States and their action. The UK has a different relationship and the Prime Minister has unique leverage and influence. And he sought to bring that to bear consistently and I would argue effectively to pursue our interests.
In what sort of way? Because he hasn't done what we wanted on Ukraine. He's gone into Venezuela, he's threatened Greenland. Where is this unique leverage?
Well, hang on a second. Firstly, when it comes to trade and the UK's economic interests, we secured trading terms with the United States
that are worse than where they were before Brexit.
Sure, I don't dispute that, but better than anyone else has managed to achieve. And secondly, when President Trump came into his second term, there were real question marks about where he would be on Ukraine, on NATO, and the Prime Minister has built a strong relationship to leverage the United States' involvement in Ukraine and NATO and European defence and security. And what the Prime Minister has sought to do is to perform what actually has been the historic responsibility of British Prime Ministers, which is when there have been divides between the United States and Europe to attempt to bridge those divides. And that's what the Prime Minister has been doing against a very challenging global backdrop, but he's been doing it successfully.
Has Donald Trump broken international law when it comes to Venezuela?
I've got nothing to add to that than the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary has already said. And as I say, and I appreciate that there are colleagues in Parliament, I followed the exchanges yesterday, who've been very strident in their criticism. I understand and respect that. What the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary are doing is choosing their words carefully and choosing their timing carefully, because they're trying to influence the situation. That's the nature of diplomacy, Sophie. I'm not here to be a commentator, and the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary are not commentators either.
If you were in Cabinet, it's fair to say you'd be taking a bit of a different line, right? I mean, I remember the time, in 2017, you called Donald Trump an odious, sad little man. Is that what you think that he's like now? If you're looking at what he's doing in
Venezuela, I am in the cabinet, and I'm part of the team, and I'm not going to make comments that make the job of the Prime Minister or the Foreign Secretary any harder than they are against the backdrop of what is a fast-moving and turbulent situation. What I can say is, obviously, a number of us in government have criticised President Trump in the past, and both President Trump and the Prime Minister have been very clear. They are not natural political allies. They don't come from the same political tradition. They have very different styles and very different characters. But the Prime Minister has worked through all of that with President Trump to build a relationship.
I'm keen to talk about...
to try and leverage that relationship in our national interest. And I think the Prime Minister's done that very successfully.
I'm hurrying because I want to talk about the health story as well, because you've got an important story today about online services. Well, what's the plan there?
So, Prime Minister announced NHS Online, which is a new online hospital service that will get people faster access to specialist care by making sure that where it's clinically appropriate and safe to do so, if you've seen a GP, you need to be referred to a specialist. If you can see that specialist initially online to review your case, look at your symptoms, and then decide the next course of action, and that gets you seen faster, we will do that.
I was interested to see some of the conditions, so menopause, endometriosis, by kind of bypassing GPs and going to specialists. Is that a bit of a recognition that sometimes GPs are just not taking these conditions seriously enough?
Well, I think they're two separate issues. It is definitely the case, particularly in women's health, that when it comes to particularly conditions like endometriosis or menopause, women have not always been getting the service that they deserve from their GP. And we're taking steps to address that through training and faster access to specialist care, sure. But there will also be, GPs by their nature are general practitioners for a wide range of conditions. They will often need to refer someone to a specialist. And when they do, if you can see that specialist faster online, and then that specialist online says, might say to you or I, actually, you need to go for a diagnostic test and scan, well, you'll be able to do that at your local hospital or diagnostic centre, but crucially, you'll have reached that stage faster. It may be the specialist says, OK, no need for any surgical procedure, but you do need a prescription. Well, that will pop up in your app. You'll be able to collect that locally. And the idea is that you'll be seen faster. We'll get an extra 8 million appointments through this route. About, a large proportion of the current NHS waiting list is around the sorts of specialisms and the sorts of conditions that we have available to treat through NHS Online. So this will make a real difference. And by the way, for anyone watching who's thinking, well, the last thing I want to do is talk to someone through a screen. I'd like face-to-face, thank you very much. What's he talking about? Well, the good news is, if I've chosen to see that specialist online rather than through my local hospital trust, chances are I've gotten out of the way of the queue for someone who would prefer to see someone face-to-face locally. So everyone benefits from this.
Can I finally ask you about this puberty blocker trial that's going ahead at King's College Hospital in London? It's expected to start this month in January, and it's involving 226 young people, all under 16, who are going to be given these puberty blocking drugs because they're questioning their gender. Now, some MPs are really, really worried about this, right? They say that it's immoral. They say it's a shameful experiment on children. Are you comfortable with, kids, perhaps as young as 10, being given these very powerful drugs that could stop them going through puberty?
Comfortable, no. What I've had to weigh up in this is how do we make sure that for a particularly vulnerable group of children and young people, they're getting access to high-quality care, and crucially, we're mitigating against risk of harm. I've followed expert advice. People may remember Hilary Cass, one of the country's leading paediatricians, was actually commissioned by the Conservatives to look at this issue. She published the Cass report into Gender Identity Services, and she set out a range of recommendations, and I'm following those recommendations.
They're very young kids, though, aren't they?
They are.
And these are very strong drugs.
And I've met lots of children, young people, who've actually been extremely angry with me in a different direction on this. People may remember when I came into government, I upheld the temporary ban that was put in place by my Conservative predecessor. I turned that into a permanent ban. and made it clear that there was not the evidence to assure me that there was a safe prescribing environment and that the drugs were proven for this particular case. These sorts of drugs are given to young people, actually, but for conditions like precocious puberty, which is a different condition. So I've sought to proceed in an evidence-based way following expert clinical advice. I've tried to take the politics out of what has been an extremely difficult and sensitive issue. I think there are still big questions about how we ever ended up in this situation where these sorts of drugs were being routinely prescribed, and we're continuing to get into that and looking, because there'll be another study looking at what's happened to that cohort of young people over time. The thing I've had to continually weigh up is that for lots of people who have been through this sort of gender identity treatment, they describe this as life-affirming and life-saving, but there is an understandable degree of public anxiety and concern. The crucial reassurance is that not just anyone will be able to sign up to this trial. They will go through extensive assessment by expert clinicians locally. That will be reviewed nationally, and every young person would need to assent. They're not old enough to consent. They would need to assent, and they would need the consent of parents. And so there are lots of checks, balances, oversights and safeguards and constant monitoring in a way that disgracefully wasn't there before. That's what gives me the confidence and assurance of knowing this trial is safe. There is a debate about whether...
the trial's safe, you would say?
Yeah, there is a debate about whether this is the right thing to do. I understand that. And there's one thing we've learned about this particular area of policy is that we shouldn't silence debate, dissent, disagreement. So we'll continue to have that, and we'll continue to be subject to scrutiny and challenge.
OK, Wes Streeting, thank you very much indeed. Wes Streeting there, the Health Secretary.
Of course, lots on the agenda for the government today, highlighted by Sophie's conversation there with the Health Secretary. The Prime Minister is travelling to Paris for a meeting of the Coalition of the Willing for talks on Ukraine's peace deal. So President Zelensky says the US-backed deal is 90% ready, which feels perhaps more optimistic than we've had before. Yeah, Mari's here to tell us about a lot of this. Mari, so clearly this is a big gathering hosted by Macron. As Sophie sort of says, there's been improving mood music, but, you know, the final 10% perhaps will be the hardest part.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at it in percentages, it might sound fantastic to say you're 90% there, but until you're 100% there, to an extent, that's slightly irrelevant. The difficulty for the Prime Minister is he's going over to Paris today at a time when everyone's talking about Venezuela, Greenland, President Trump, and they're there to talk about Russia and Ukraine. I think it's undeniable that Venezuela and Greenland will be also on the agenda when you have huge kind of European global leaders convening all together at this particular time. Timing is everything in politics. But what's really interesting is the fact that actually over the weekend the Prime Minister said that 90% figure that Zelensky had mentioned was accurate. He said that he was right to say that. So as far as we understand, from the PM's understanding and conversations with the Ukrainians, that ballpark figure is just about accurate. Not only is Venezuela and Greenland overshadowing the Coalition of the Willing meeting today, but also, actually, Number 10 and the Prime Minister are really, really keen for everyone to talk about what they really want to talk about at Cabinet, which is the cost of living. And again, the Prime Minister starting 2026 with this vision of what he's going to do on the cost of living, and it's been utterly derailed by global headwinds and global events. And so what is really interesting is what comes out of that press conference this evening. It's just after 5 o'clock in Paris, and it'll be obviously live on Sky News, where we...
With all of the leaders, no? Just the Prime Minister?
The Prime Minister, and I think perhaps Macron, I'll confirm that in terms of exactly which leaders it's going to be. But it will be live on Sky News, and that will be interesting to see exactly what comes out of that press conference and if some level of progress is announced or if it's just more warm words.
Mm-hmm. And no doubt... So many of the questions there will be about Greenland, not actually Ukraine. But Mari, great stuff as always. Thanks so much. Now, as you probably noticed,
We certainly have. It's freezing this morning. There are snow showers, there's wind and ice, and that is unsurprisingly causing chaos on the roads and also on the railways across parts of the UK.
Hundreds of schools were closed yesterday and flights were cancelled, some trains disrupted as well. London North Eastern Railways urging people not to travel between Edinburgh and Aberdeen, as no trains are running until 2 p.m. today due to heavy snow. 2 amber snow warnings have been issued for parts of Scotland until this evening. The Met Office says a further 5 to 10 centimetres expected, with 15 centimetres seen in quite a few places.
So there's lots of snow and it's very beautiful despite all the disruption. Yesterday you sent us lots of lovely pictures. Please keep sending them to us today. We're particularly fans of the dog ones, I think. They're my favourites.
Brave dogs, I always think that.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, if I'm in the snow, I'm wearing multiple layers.
Well, you do the little dog jackets sometimes,
well,
right?
Well, still, bare feet.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I mean, I know their feet are pretty tough and desensitised. I don't know what tangent I'm going down here.
Anyway,
I know nothing.
Email us your dog pictures, your snow pictures, mornings@sky.uk. Mornings@sky.uk.
And they're lovely.
They are.
Anyway, should we move on? Our next story, we also want to know your opinion on. People over 70 could be forced to take an eye test if they want to keep driving.
So the government's expected to launch consultation on the measure. It's all part of its road safety strategy, which is due out tomorrow. Let's get a bit more on this, shall we? With Sadia, who's here to tell us more. What's the thinking?
So it seems like more rules for drivers, and particularly the over 70s, who already have to renew their driver's licences every 3 years compared to the rest of us, which is every 10 years. And so now a plan to potentially impose mandatory eye checks on them. So an eye test, we already know that everybody has to declare any medical issues, but these eye tests are part of these plans that the government is announcing. There could also be cognitive tests. Now, they haven't said what that might look like, but in other settings, these are things like, your ability to gauge distances, reflex and orientation and things like that. This is all set out in the new road safety strategy, which is due to be published tomorrow. And it is the first of its kind for over 10 years. The idea is, the government says, to reduce serious injuries and deaths while still allowing drivers to have some independence. And that is because last year, a huge, I think it was about a quarter of drivers killed in collisions were over the age of 70. So they want to reduce that by 65% by 2035.
It's quite a big number, isn't it, actually? It's more than I thought, the older over 70.
Yeah, and that is for collisions, I've got to say. For all accidents, it's a different figure. But some reports say that this strategy that is due to be announced tomorrow could also include changes for the rest of us. So things like penalty points if you don't wear your seatbelt, which currently doesn't exist. Also greater fines for offenders going up to £600, currently £300, and more penalties for people who are driving without insurance. So all of that's set to be announced and then due to go into a consultation before any of it becomes law.
Sadia, great stuff. Thanks so much. Well, coming up, we're going to be speaking to a senior managing oil editor at S&P Global to talk about the oil story behind
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Welcome back. Well, we are going to kick off again this half an hour with more on Venezuela. Much of the focus, of course, of the past few days has been in New York, where Nicolas Maduro appeared in court. But for the people of Venezuela, there's so much unknown about what's coming next.
So, actually, presenter Mark Austin's been trying to get a sense of the mood on the Colombian-Venezuelan border.
Still in place but not in power, Nicolas Maduro was overseeing Venezuela's National Assembly at the start of a new year, but not in a way he could ever have imagined.
En el cargo de presidenta encargada de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela. Felicitaciones.
This is the woman sworn in as the country's new leader. Delcy Rodriguez, a Maduro loyalist, is Trump's chosen one to lead Venezuela now. This empty chair belongs to Nicolas Maduro's wife, also, of course, in US custody. The son of the ousted leader was greeted with cheers from the chamber, calling for resistance to the United States.
We are being persecuted, but we're not some goods that can be sold or bought. We are Bolivarian revolutionaries, we are Chavistas, and we are here to defend Venezuela, to defend the peace of the country, to support our country in whatever needs to be done so that Venezuela can remain in peace.
The acting president must now decide if she is to toe the American line.
I come with sorrow over the kidnapping of two heroes we have as hostages in the United States of America. Let's swear as one country to move Venezuela forward in these terrible times of threat against the stability and peace of the nation. I swear.
Outside, Maduro's supporters gathered, defiantly demanding the return of Maduro to the capital. Demands for his release will fall on deaf ears in the White House, but Venezuelans are united in one thing: their feeling of humiliation.
We will continue here until they return it to us, until our President Nicolas Maduro and our First Lady Celia Flores return. On behalf of the Venezuelan people, President, we are waiting for you with open arms.
I'm not a sympathizer of Maduro, but neither am I with the opposition. Too bad they grabbed us all with our pants down. What happened to the defense? What happened to the militias? What happened? I've always said it, the militias are a laughingstock.
Colombia, where we are, and also now in Donald Trump's sights, has been reinforcing its border with Venezuela. There is nervousness here about what the American administration may do next. The demonstrations in Caracas right now are in support of Maduro. No sign of opposition protests in a city and a country still very much in the grip of the remnants of the Maduro regime. Mark Austin, Sky News, Cucuta, on the Colombian-Venezuelan border.
Well, central, of course, to the conversation has been oil and what happens to that oil in Venezuela. Donald Trump said the US will run the country, at least temporarily, and tap its vast oil reserves. Let's speak to Herman Wang, Senior Managing Oil Editor at SP Global. Great to have you with us, Herman. Thanks so much for joining us. Just first of all, we've all been reflecting on these huge oil reserves that Venezuela has, albeit a relatively low oil output each day. How long does it take to alter that relatively low output?
Yeah, well, thanks. Good morning, Wilf. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I mean, we've seen
Venezuela's crude oil production declined precipitously over the last couple of decades, from a heyday of about 3.5 million barrels per day in the 1990s down to less than 1 million barrels per day. Our latest Platts OPEC survey had them about 960,000 barrels per day in November. So, in a roughly 100 million barrels per day global oil market, that's like less than 1% of oil supply. What we're looking at right now is if the sanctions are lifted by the U.S., which is at this point they're still on, and the U.S. has indicated that they're going to keep them on to keep pressure on this the new Delcy Rodriguez administration. But if they are lifted and they're allowed to get this outside investment in, we could see it go up to 1.4, 1.5 million barrels per day in the next year or so. Again, if those sanctions are lifted. Longer term, it's going to take a lot of investment, a lot of billions of dollars, perhaps a decade or so to get back to that heyday that they had in the 1990s. A lot of infrastructure has deteriorated over the years due to sanctions. We've seen a lot of brain drain from the industry due to all the uncertainty in the industry, uncertainty politically. We count 28,000 inactive wells needing rehabilitation in the oil fields there. No reports of exploratory drilling in Venezuela since 2019. So a lot of work is going to have to happen to get them back to a growth track. And that's no certain thing in an environment where a lot of oil companies are scaling back their spending.
Talk to me about why their production declined so much. Was it pure and simple lack of investment, or was it in part by design? Obviously, quite often OPEC members try to suppress supply to keep the price high, and there's other actors that have been involved, of course, behind Maduro in Venezuela. Which of those factors has had the biggest impact?
Yeah, I think purely stated, I think it's just mismanagement over the years of the whole sector. I think if you talk to a lot of people in the industry, you'll see a lot of just corruption in the sector. Again, I talked about the brain drain. A lot of bright young people in Venezuela that could have been in the oil industry helping sustain that growth have simply exited the country due to the political conditions under the Maduro regime. So part of the challenge is that Venezuelan crude is very what we call heavy crude. It's not it's very viscous, very thick. It requires a diluent to come in to kind of to dilute it so that the pipelines can transport it. It's a very technically challenging oil reserve to try and extract, and so it requires a lot of investment. And I think it's not like a lot of the lighter crude oils or the easily extractable crude oils that we see, for example, in the Middle East. So it does require a lot more investment, and that investment in recent years has just not been there.
Obviously, oil prices declined marginally yesterday, but just a one-day move and a small move. Switching focus a little bit, if there was a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, would that have a big effect on global energy prices?
Presumably yes, because we'd have to see what the sanctions regimes would look like. Now you have the EU that has maintained that they've maintained that they're going to keep the pressure on Russia and maintain a lot of the sanctions that they've put on, the ban on imports of Russian crude, as well as looking to enforce on the exports by countries refining Russian crude. That mainly targets India. So there will be still some restrictions on the trade of Russian crude. But by and large, I think you would see, if there is a peace deal, a certain relaxation from the U.S. side of sanctions, and that could help get some of these volumes that have been stuck on vessels, unable to discharge, floating around the market to get to market.
Herman, great stuff. Thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Just want to take you to Paris very quickly, which is the location for the coalition of the willing meeting, where leaders and other important figures are meeting to try and sort out that all-important peace deal for Ukraine. This is the French President Emmanuel Macron meeting arriving at that meeting, their European leaders meeting to discuss the peace plan for Ukraine. He's going to be hosting 30 different allies who are keen to try and get that deal over the line. So you can see him there with Mark Carney on his classic long handshake, firm handshake from Macron. It's his kind of trademark, isn't it, at these meetings? President Zelensky saying the deal is 90% of the way there.
Yeah, big meeting for Ukraine, and no doubt they'll be discussing latest in North America as well, and the Canadian PM in attendance. Now, we've got some interesting new figures about the way we buy cars. It tells us something about the popularity of EVs and Chinese-made EVs in particular.
So this is new research from the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, and it's found that almost 1 in 4 buyers went for electric cars in 2025, and Chinese companies accounted for almost 10% of new registrations.
Let's bring in their Chief Executive, Mike Hawes. Mike, very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Morning, it's a pleasure.
So just frame the headline numbers that you've come out with yesterday, first of all. So one is that over 2 million new cars were purchased last year, which is kind of quite encouraging in an otherwise tepid economy, and 25% were electric vehicles. How do those two numbers compare to the prior 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, I think the word encouraging is probably the right one there. I mean, 2 million is a benchmark. We haven't been there since before the pandemic, 2019. If you look back over the past decade, normally you'd be about 2.25, 2.3. So we're still about 250,000 units per year short of that. But the big change is, as you say, the increasing number of people buying electric vehicles. Nearly 1 in 4 are now buying EVs.
Do you think that the recent change in the budget, where EVs are going to be taxed per mile of their usage, will lead to that? I imagine there's been a steady rise in recent years of the percentage of EVs. What are your expectations for the year ahead?
The trouble is with the budget, we've got very conflicting messages. On the one hand, they found some additional money to support the electric car grant, which was only introduced last year. But as you say, they also announced that from 2028 there'll be a pence per mile tax on EVs. Now, that invariably is going to suppress demand because people don't like paying taxes. That's it's a fact of life. And this is a tax that's levied just on EVs. Now, you fill up at the fuel station, you're paying VAT and you're paying fuel duty on that litre of fuel. So it is still favourable in a tax take to drive an EV compared to petrol and diesel. But the message that sends, I said, is very conflicting for consumers.
Can I ask you about the Chinese cars? Because it's quite interesting to see the number of new number plates registered to Chinese companies. Is that an increase? How does it compare?
Yeah, I mean, the share of Chinese brands in the UK market basically doubled last year. It's around 9.5% now. The UK has always been very open to foreign brands. You can go back to the 70s when European brands first started coming here in greater numbers, then the Japanese, then the Koreans, now the Chinese. Now, that stimulates competition, tends to drive down prices, so it is good for the consumer. But what we were always conscious of, though, is making sure that the UK is always a very attractive place to invest, to manufacture. And you need a strong market for that, for those vehicles that you'll be producing.
And is it a strong attractive place?
It's got better. I said market was up 3.5%. As you mentioned, the economic backdrop is not great. So that's not a bad performance, but it still could be better.
Do we have tariffs on Chinese cars?
Yeah, vehicles coming in from China, like from other countries outside of those countries like the EU, which we have a free trade agreement, are subject to a 10% tariff.
So it's only a 10% tariff on Chinese EVs, because the US has a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs.
Yeah, the US has changed. The UK products going into the US, when they announced those tariffs, jumped to 27.5%. We've now got it down to 10%, which is as low as any other country in the world.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, though, because obviously pure cost economics, the Chinese EVs are undercutting all manufacturers.
Their costs of production are much lower than you'll have in a traditional Western economy. So yes, they have to pay logistics costs, import duty, but still their cost advantage over a Western-produced vehicle is quite significant.
I guess it makes sense if the US had tariffs at 100%, why we're getting so many Chinese cars in the UK market. Right?
Yeah, and what they're bringing in is electric vehicles, but also plug-in hybrids. So, they're trying to fulfil their demand from across the board, and they're doing the same in Europe as well.
Clearly, for new vehicle sales, 2 million or so of them, which clearly doesn't make up all of the cars on the road, 25% was EVs last year. Are we on track at this pace to meet that requirement of no new combustion engine cars being sold from 2030 onwards? Because the EU's just relaxed their similar rule, which was only targeting, I think, 2035, not even 2030.
The short answer is no. the deadline, if you will, for the UK has flip-flopped significantly over the last 4 or 5 years. As it's currently, the policy says that after 2030, you'll only be able to sell basically hybrids or pure electric, with 2035 the end date for everything other than total zero-emission vehicles, in other words, electric. There's a mandate which compels manufacturers to sell an increasing proportion of their UK sales as pure electric, leading to 80% by 2030. We are behind that curve, and the gap is actually getting worse.
So the question, I guess, is if we are likely to have to change that policy and push back the date, as the EU has already done, with a 5-year later deadline in the first place, is it better for the industry if they abandon it sooner rather than later?
What we're asking for is a review. I mean, they always envisage having a review. That needs to be brought forward, because the regulation, when it was conceived, we were in a very different world. Energy prices were much lower. Then Putin invades Ukraine and energy prices shot up. Raw materials, battery prices were coming down. It's not the case now. The demand for EVs was because he was kind of in the foothills, it was accelerating much more rapidly. We're in a very different world now. So we think there should be a review of that transition to make sure the costs, the demand, the infrastructure is where it needs to be to ensure any regulation is fit for purpose.
Mike, really interesting. Thanks so much. Great to see you.
Well, there's lots of snow, there is lots of ice, and that, of course, means travel chaos. It means school closures. It also means beautiful pictures, of course, of the snow as well. So if you've got any, send them to us at mornings@sky.uk. But let's have a look at what is happening with the weather.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
It's going to be cold all week with further wintry hazards and the possibility of more widespread snow and coastal gales towards the weekend. Snow and ice warnings have been issued, with another amber covering northern Scotland today. Expect an extra 5 to 10 centimetres of snow there, locally more. There's a widespread, locally severe frost now, bringing icy stretches. Scotland, Ireland and Northern Ireland will see rain, sleet and mainly hill snow taking over this morning, while England and Wales look generally fine. Expect further patchy snow in the north, however, and more wintry showers near southwestern coast. It'll be windy in the north and the west, but marginally less cold. That's your weather.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Coming up, we are going to be talking about the extraordinary story of Brigitte Macron and the people who have been appearing in court found guilty of cyberbullying over false claims, that she was born a man.
First Minister, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to see you. How are you feeling?
Looking forward to getting into the parliamentary chamber.
Are you any further forward to making a decision?
No, it's an important day today.
All of the claims were in line with my parliamentary duties, so I'm making that clear to you, Conor.
He was a Scot through and through.
He was a very good politician.
Alex Salmond was controversial, he was a disruptor, but above all, he was respected.
Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
His face said it all.
My intention to stand down as party leader.
This is now a storm with deadly consequences. How are they feeling?
They're a bit scared at the minute.
We've been told to evacuate.
How are you feeling?
Devastated.
Hundreds of homes were wiped out by flooding. I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent.
It was probably the darkest time in my life.
Scott is 5 years sober after a cocaine addiction left him close to death.
Scotland has a shameful record. Worse than England, the worst in Europe. Why not just say you've failed? Because then you might get more respect from families who've lost loved ones.
This is where one of the UK's most prolific rapists thought he'd got away with murder.
Sky News can reveal that former sex workers had told police he was sexually violent.
My Emma.
Free wherever you get your news.
It's over, isn't it?
The Americans say he is Rossi, a fraudster.
This has been one of the most bizarre cases ever heard in a courtroom in this country.
A dangerous murderer.
Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Ennis after this?
She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars.
By doing the right thing, it's destroyed your life.
They terrorised me. They intimidated me.
Sky News, the full story first.
gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Welcome back. We want to bring you an absolutely fascinating story. I don't know if you've been following it over the last couple of years, but 10 people have been found guilty of cyberbullying France's First Lady, Brigitte Macron, by spreading false online claims about her gender and sexuality, including allegations that she was born a man. Well, joining us to discuss this is the French journalist Anne-Elisabeth Moutet. Thanks so much for joining us on this. Can you just clarify exactly what these people were tried for and convicted of?
They were convicted and tried for cyberbullying. That means not only spreading on social networks lies about Brigitte Macron, but also of having been told several times that these were lies and sort of persisting. And then essentially it's a two-pronged attack. You have the French court case that came yesterday to light, but you also have a court case against the MAGA influencer Candace Owens in America, who has been also spreading the idea that Brigitte Macron is a man. And also she, like some of the French defendants, used the expression pedophile when she talked about Brigitte Macron because of her relationship with Emmanuel Macron, with whom she's been married, I might add, since 2007.
I'm fascinated by the story, I have to say. It's one of those things where, for most of us, it feels completely ludicrous and ridiculous that these comments are being taken seriously. But I've had people in my life coming up to me saying, I've heard these podcasts, I've heard this, is this true, what's going on? And it feels to me like there was a deliberate decision to do what they weren't supposed to do. Because often with these things, the advice is to ignore it, to pretend that it's not happening, to not give it the oxygen of publicity. But the Macrons decided that it got so bad that they needed to take public action. Do you think that was the right call?
I think, yes, it was the right call because the whole notion of freedom of speech is excellent. I know it's always difficult to have, but however, the demultiplication of and amplification of such claims within the hot house, that is the cybersphere, especially social networks, means it's almost humanly impossible to stop each statement as it is. I used to make the case, and I'm like you, like lots of people came to me and said, but she's a man, isn't she? And I said, no, she's not a man. She was a teacher in the French school system. The French law says that everybody who's in employment in the French system must go and see la médecine du travail, the sort of employment ministry, medical service, so that people don't sort of spread epidemics. I'm talking about 19th century laws almost. And it is absolutely inconceivable that she could not, have been proven to be a man.
But the fact she's been put in this position as well, that she's having to prove it or even dignify some of these, which I would say quite misogynistic claims.
Yes, and her daughter was at the court yesterday morning, and she was saying, my mother could not sleep over this. My mother was waking up in the morning and thinking about it. What do I wear so that people won't call me a man today? Which, of course, is a no, it doesn't work. And small children would go to her grandchildren would go to her daughter, Brigitte Macron's grandchildren, and say, at school, people told me your your grandmother is your grandfather. I mean, it took personal implications, and I think they decided to make this a very visible case, since it was very visible anyway, in order to make that point that there's a kind of madness that has been accepted, in which we would not agree to in any other circumstance. You cannot, I mean, we've all been sort of said something on television, and then immediately you got 2,000 tweets sort of saying horrible things about you, usually starting with the way you look and then going downhill from there. And can you imagine when you are the wife of the president of France?
Can I just quickly check? So was Candace Owens one of the 10 people who was convicted? This is, of course, the very high-profile US commentator. And what are the punishments that have been handed out?
Two things. First of all, there are two parallel lawsuits, because the law is different in America than it is in France. And therefore, what you had was something by French judges in French law. And no, she was not part of that. But it's coming for her with much higher damages, because this is America and damages are much higher in America. So in France, actually, the defendants, the one who was very obviously sort of had ill intentions and was spreading this, is a special fake account called Zoe Sagan, like Sagan, the French novelist, well-known novelist. He is a 41-year-old advertising man who spread all sorts of conspiracy theories through his account, and Brigitte Macron chose to sort of pick him.
We're out of time, but it's been so interesting talking to you today. Thank you so much for being on the programme. We've got to squeeze in a few of these dog pictures because they are gorgeous, and we ask you to send in to mornings@sky.uk some of your beautiful snow pictures. Look at this. This is Kelly, who sent us this picture of Angus, the cockapoo, enjoying the snow in Aberdeen. That is gorgeous.
With a cold nose, no doubt. And we have another one of Betty, looking very cute in the snow as well. Have we got Betty coming? No, not loaded, alas.
We'll try next hour for Betty.
But we'll have Betty next hour. We are out of time this hour of the show. We're going to take a quick break.
What about this one? You missed out the Everton fans.
Well, I didn't know that one was coming. I would have preferred to see Betty, but there we go. We're out of time. We'll be right back.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophy and Wilf, good morning from me as well. Lots to update you on today.
A defiant defence, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro says he's a decent man as he appears in court.
Donald Trump sets his eyes on Greenland, saying he needs the territory for national security right now.
The Prime Minister will travel to Paris later today for a meeting of the Coalition of the Willing, hoping to finalise Ukraine's peace deal.
Christmas retail figures have been revealed. It's the end of an era, though, for 2 high street stores.
And more snow on the way. Wintry weather causes travel delays across the UK.
Good morning. Welcome to the programme today. Look, events following America's capture of the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, have been moving fast, and we mean fast. And overnight that continued because Donald Trump warned that the US needs to take Greenland, in his words, for national security right now.
The US president told NBC News that he was very serious about moving ahead with a plan to take control of the territory. And it comes as Delcy Rodriguez was sworn in as Venezuela's interim president, calling the capture of Nicolas Maduro a kidnapping. But Maduro was defiant as he appeared in court in New York, declaring himself a decent man.
Well, our US correspondent Martha Kellner was in court for Maduro's appearance. She sent this report.
What a difference 3 days makes. Nicolas Maduro, snatched from the opulence of his Venezuelan palace, now being frog-marched away from one of America's most notorious prisons. From president to defendant in one long weekend. Then a breakfast-time helicopter ride into Manhattan. But this is no pleasure tour for Maduro, heading to his first court hearing. Maduro is being held alongside his wife, former First Lady Cilia Flores, seen here being removed from the helicopter after him. The world waiting to see the former Venezuelan president inside the US justice system. Maduro pleaded not guilty to charges including narco-terrorism and possessing machine guns and destructive devices. No cameras were allowed inside the courtroom, but I was in there a matter of meters from Nicolas Maduro, and it was incredibly dramatic. I heard him coming before I saw him, the jangle of his shackles as he came into the room, and he wished everyone a happy new year. He said it 3 or 4 times. He was then asked by the judge to confirm his identity, at which point Nicolas Maduro responded. He said, "I am President Nicolas Maduro Moros, President of the Republic of Venezuela. Here, kidnapped since January the 3rd, I was captured in my home in Caracas, Venezuela." The judge then interrupted him, saying, "There will be a time and a place to go into this. At this point, I only want to know one thing. Are you Nicolas Maduro Moros?" There was another astounding moment right at the end of this hearing as Maduro got up to walk out of the room. A gentleman in the public gallery stood up and addressed him directly. That man is Pedro Rojas, a Venezuelan in exile. He tells me he was imprisoned in the country in 2019 and now lives in the US. What did you say to Mr. Maduro? You stood up at the end of that hearing.
Okay, I speak English, I understand. So,
I told Nicolas Maduro Moros that he will pay, that the United States of America will bring him to justice, that starting today, 5th of January 2026, the great age of Venezuela begins.
He looked at you, didn't he, straight in the eyes. How did that feel?
Nicolas Maduro told me that he was innocent and that he was a man of God. I told him that we're also men of God, because we've never attacked the Venezuelan church, as he has done on numerous occasions.
God willing, he'll spend the rest of his days in prison.
Unite with them to fight against our common enemy.
Rival protests outside court reflecting the different views Venezuelans in America have about this US intervention. Some are jubilant.
Best day of my life. It's not only what I feel, it's all Venezuela feel. That people over there is no. They are no.
Are you worried what happens to Venezuela next? that there's not much of a plan?
Venezuela will be great. Venezuela will be great because America supports Venezuela.
Others are cynical.
We know that the real reason that the U.S. wants to kidnap Maduro and orchestrate the next phase of regime change is for resources. It's for oil, it's for minerals. Nothing about it is for the freedom of the Venezuelan people.
After the hearing concluded, Maduro in a motorcade was taken back to prison. His next hearing set for March. The consequences of his capture are unknown. Martha Kellner, Sky News, New York.
Well, across the region, leaders are asking questions about who might be next after Trump told reporters on Air Force One Colombia was run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States.
Mexico also doesn't escape. Donald Trump says that drugs are pouring through the country via Mexico, and America is going to have to do something.
But perhaps most in focus has been the semi-autonomous Danish territory Greenland, which the president has once again raised the prospect of annexing, citing its strategic location for defence and mineral wealth.
Well, look, as you'd expect, the Danish Prime Minister isn't happy about that. This is what she had to say.
Firstly, I believe that the American president should be taken seriously when he says that he wants Greenland. But I also want to make it clear that if the United States chooses to attack another NATO country militarily, then everything stops.
It's going to be fascinating today because all of the European leaders and others, like Canada's Prime Minister, as we saw arriving, are meeting with President Macron, or a meeting hosted by President Macron to talk about Ukraine. But this is clearly going to come up as well. And you do just pause to wonder, as more comments have come out overnight, whether it's from his Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, or from himself to NBC earlier in the day, is he really serious about the Greenland thing? Because it is actually very different from the Venezuela situation, most notably because it's dealing with allies as opposed to adversaries.
I mean, look, it's been so interesting to see the situation unfolding as well. And I've been tracking the kind of European response, in particular, starting from yesterday morning when they weren't really even saying that in the UK that Donald Trump shouldn't invade Greenland. Mm-hmm. Now it's really toughened up, partly, of course, because of the very strong response from Denmark. We saw there them effectively saying, look, if Donald Trump invades Greenland, that's the end of NATO. It's done. It's over. And so I think there's been a forced toughened response.
And it's not by surprise as well, which gives them all a chance to lobby the US president more so than they perhaps had over the weekend with the Venezuelan action. Just to pause as well and touch on the situation in Venezuela. As we mentioned, Maduro's former vice president has been sworn in. Lots of debate about, therefore, what about the opposition leader, who, of course, won a Nobel Peace Prize late last year. There was reporting yesterday that President Trump, by the Washington Post, didn't want her to be leader because she'd accepted the Nobel Peace Prize. Here was her response to that.
Well, it hasn't happened yet, but I certainly would love to be able to personally tell him that we believe the Venezuelan people, because this is a prize of the Venezuelan people, certainly want to give it to him and share it with him. What he has done, as I said, is historic. It's a huge step towards a democratic transition.
Extraordinary. I mean, this is where we are with foreign policy now. Yeah. It seems extraordinary. Well, anyway, let's return to the UK, shall we? Because as you've probably noticed, it is absolutely freezing this morning. There are snow showers, wind and ice, unsurprisingly, causing travel chaos across parts of the United Kingdom. Let's bring in Lottie Leeming, who's outside in the cold for us, braving it. There we go. She's in Yeadon, got down to the right place. Very good morning to you, and break it down for us. How much has it been beautiful snow versus travel chaos?
Well, good morning. I think yesterday, if you were in Scotland, particularly in the north, you would have absolutely hated it. It was, the first day back, wasn't it, for many people going back to school and to work after the Christmas holidays. And it was absolutely seemed to come to an absolute grind and a halt because people just could not get anywhere. Today, there is still an amber warning, a weather warning from the Met Office, which is the serious one where it says we can expect more disruption. There could be power cuts, danger to life, and that involves, again, the north of Scotland. And yesterday, many parts of of the UK had snow and ice to contend with. We had companies saying work from home if you can, and lots of schools were shut. So today people will be trying again to start the new year after the festive season. We're at Eden Tarn. Tarn is the lake here. It's just started snowing on cue, and you can see this huge expanse of white. That is usually the water, the lake, and just behind us there is Leeds Bradford Airport, which is very high up. We're very exposed here in Eden, and we've seen some gritters there cleaning and clearing away the snow and ice on the runway there. So we think things are running better, but it's certainly this Arctic air mass, this blast that we're in the grip of, is certainly a big freeze, which I don't think we've seen for quite a number of years yet. A continuous, consecutive few days of cold weather. Lots of dog walkers. Good morning out today. Hardy dog walkers here in Yorkshire. But it's really not going to go away. This cold snap is going to continue and could be heading south as well. And as well as this snow and the ice, we're also expecting, the Met Office said, that we could have gusty winds, we could have heavy rain by the end of the week. So all that together is going to make it pretty miserable. And as I say, heading down south later in the next few days. So the advice, as ever, is just to be really careful. We've travelled this morning. You just allow plenty of time and take it easy. Ice on the road, so just make sure that your vehicle is in a good condition. What we found yesterday was loads of breakdowns because a lot of people will have left their cars for a couple of weeks, not been out in them, and then they come out in this sort of weather and the car breaks down. So it's that practical advice from motoring organisations to make sure you've got a flask of coffee, that you're well layered up, you've got plenty of warm clothes on, and that your phone is fully charged. It's those sensible, practical advice for people, really, if they are heading out during these sub-zero temperatures. But at the moment, it looks picturesque, it looks lovely, doesn't it? But it's when you're trying to get from A to B which the problems can start. Also, there's been some amber cold weather alerts for people who may be vulnerable, who may have underlying health conditions as well, who may be a little bit older, over 65. Again, the advice to stock up on your food and your medications, prescriptions, so you don't have to go out. We don't want people with slips and trips falling on the ice. Our hospitals are already full to capacity with people with flu. So really the advice is to check in on vulnerable and elderly neighbours and just make sure people are OK. We know it's winter, we know it gets cold, but it really is an Arctic grip on the UK at the moment, and not many parts of the UK are escaping it, and it's set to last a good few days yet. But the Tarn, the lake here, almost all frozen over at the moment, but dog walkers are still out. But we're not going to see this bustle of boats that we would normally see here at this time of year. They still come out on the lake if it's clear, even in temperatures like this, but not at the moment. Completely frozen over, but looks very pretty.
It does. It looks beautiful. Lottie, thank you so much indeed. We've been getting some lovely pictures, I should say, particularly pets, lots of dogs, a cat as well, snuck in there too. We're going to show some of them to you later, so do keep sending them in to us. Email mornings@sky.uk.
Now, the Prime Minister will travel to Paris for a meeting of the Coalition of the Willing this morning for talks on Ukraine's peace deal.
So President Zelensky says that apparently the deal, backed by the US, is 90% ready, which feels quite a high number, but Maria's going to break it down for us. So how optimistic are you feeling?
Well, I think the difficulty is that saying something is 90% there sounds great on paper, but until that 10% is finished, the 90% becomes slightly more irrelevant. And that's partly because that 10% is, to an extent, the most thorny issues between Russia and Ukraine, and therefore there needs to be a huge amount of work and heavy lifting diplomatically done in order to get to a point where they can actually get to that 100% mark. We're expecting many European leaders and also global leaders. We saw Mark Carney arriving earlier this morning for this Coalition of the Willing meeting. There's going to be a press conference just after 5 o'clock this evening. It's going to be Zelensky, obviously Starmer, Macron, and the fourth one I forgot, which was Friedrich Merz of Germany. And that is really going to be a set-piece moment in which they are going to want to present a level of improvement and progress. The difficulty is that Keir Starmer is walking a really tight, difficult tightrope, diplomatically speaking, when it comes to trying not to alienate Donald Trump, when it comes to his reaction to those Venezuela assaults, and also conversations around Greenland and the US wanting to take over Greenland. And that is why we've seen the PM be relatively tight-lipped, not actually say very much in reaction to Venezuela, and even in relation to Greenland, being quite measured in his response, supporting the Danes, but not actively attacking Donald Trump. And that is because they need Donald Trump on side for these negotiations and actually to try and make sure that they get some level of justice for Ukraine in this deal.
Mara, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. It's going to be a very important set of conversations over the course of today. Now, after those US actions in Venezuela, Donald Trump's reiterated his threat to take over Greenland, which, of course, is a Danish territory. Joining us is the Danish MP Lars Christian Brask. Thanks so much for joining us. Very good morning to you. How worried are you in Denmark with these latest threats?
No, it's obviously, good morning to you as well, by the way. It's obviously something that we have to take seriously, but it's not as if we fear that Greenland and Denmark is going to be invaded by the US.
So you don't believe these latest threats or comments are real?
Well, you always got to take them serious, and you know, he is a bully, but, you know, to start taking over a country of an ally that has helped you in war on terror in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and has had a close relationship for the last 80 years, you know, it's so hard to imagine that a partner, a friend would do that to you. But of course, we need to take it serious. And we have to find out what is it that is important for Trump. I think everything is possible. He can have the bases he wants in Greenland, the surveillance, he wants access to minerals, etc. Of course, you need to be doing it by the rules environmentally, and you've got to pay for it, etc. But everything is pretty much possible as long as the Greenlanders thinks it's a good idea.
Lars, I don't know how closely you've been following comments from your European allies, the leadership of your European allies and the UK in particular. Here, yesterday, there was quite a sort of slow start to the day in terms of specifically backing Greenland's independence, though the Prime Minister did get there throughout the course of the day, at the same time trying not to criticise directly the actions in Venezuela. Have you been disappointed by the scale of backing from some European allies, or ultimately do you think it is there?
No, we have seen it. This is not the first time that Trump is threatening to take over Greenland. We've seen support on those occasions. And yesterday, as you said, I think Keir Starmer was actually the last one out saying that, of course, you can't take another country, you have to adhere by international orders, etc., and full support for Greenland and Denmark. So we've seen it with EU members, we've seen it with our Nordic colleagues, etc. So a strong, clear support from our other allies.
Do you think, I mean, later today, obviously, it's a meeting because of Ukraine, the coalition of the willing in Paris, but there'll be a press conference later this afternoon with Starmer, with Macron, with Merz, I think with Carney. Do you expect them all to stand up together strongly and condemn the idea of Donald Trump taking Greenland?
Well, in Paris, it's the coalition of willing that's meeting, and that's all about Ukraine. So I think the focus will be, and the doorstep will be on Ukraine. But if a journalist asks about Greenland, I'm sure there will be a unity.
Lars, just finally, do you think it's possible President Trump is making these threats to try and push the coalition of the willing towards a peace deal, even if President Zelensky still resists parts of it?
Greenland has something to do with Ukraine.
Do you think he's making threats towards NATO allies as a whole to try and cajole them to do other things that he wants?
I find it very hard to understand what goes on in the US president's head sometimes, but to use this in such an important negotiation about Ukraine, no, I don't think that's part of the puzzle.
Lars, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So important to get the view from there in Will's interview too, but we can continue, of course, with Donald Trump, with Venezuela and Greenland, increasingly with the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Dame Emily Thornberry. Thanks for being with us.
Not at all.
How seriously should we take Donald Trump when he says he wants to take control of Greenland?
So I'm of the camp that believes that you shouldn't take him literally. That when he says something, quite often there's a lot of bluster. So when he says, I'm taking over Venezuela, we can now see, and I thought this didn't mean anything because he had no boots on the ground, that actually taking over Venezuela means he's going to bully people. That's what he's done in terms of taking over Venezuela.
He still went in and...
No, he take over and he took the leaders. But in terms of taking over Venezuela, this was not a full-scale invasion. You know, when you take over the oil fields, you don't do it by... We haven't until now tried to take over oil fields by simply threatening people. So, you know, I don't think it's quite the way that he says it. That's what I'm saying. So I've been of the opinion that in order to keep one's mental health in good stead, and you wake up in the morning and you pick up your phone and you think, right, what's he done now? Don't look at what he's saying, look at what he's done. And if he says something, will he say it 3 days later? The thing about Greenland is that he has been saying it for some time. So I think that it is a serious threat. I don't know whether he's thought through what it really means in terms of NATO and his relationship with people who are supposed to be close allies. And as Lars was saying so movingly, you know, the Danish people have been with the Americans whenever they've been called on. And the only time that they called on for under Article 5, you know, for NATO to be together was to go into Afghanistan, and Danish people went in to protect the Americans and lost their lives. You know, this is not on. And actually, you know, Greenland is part of NATO. And if the Americans want more bases there, actually people of Greenland would like that because they'd like the work. And there used to be many more bases there. So they have no problem about that. You just can't own it. You just do it through working with other countries. And Donald Trump needs to understand that sometimes working with other countries is a better way of doing things than just doing everything by yourself.
Can you therefore understand the Prime Minister's desire to work with President Trump, not criticise him?
No, listen, you can work with people, but you can still criticise them. I don't think there's a problem with that. My best friends, you know that I'm their best friend, but I will at times say, I don't think you should be wearing that hat. I mean, I just...
but I guess to get into the details, you'd do that privately. You wouldn't do that publicly. You wouldn't do the criticise point.
I think it's... You would if you could, and if that worked. But I think that if we're segueing into defending international law, then I think that needs to be done publicly. Because the thing about international law is that it's basically... International law is based on the agreement of countries around the world. And so if one country does something and its close allies say nothing about it, then the implication is, well, that's OK. You can carry on behaving like that. And then international law changes, the international norms change, because in the end, international law is nothing more highfalutin than this is what the world agrees should be the accepted behaviour.
Just on, as we're talking about the UK government response, and there has been criticism, as you said, that they haven't called out Donald Trump strongly enough. Let's just listen to the Health Secretary Wes Streeting this morning, because this is, I guess, the kind of current line today when it comes to what they're saying about Trump.
OK.
At a time when we can see the security of NATO members and the alliance at threat, particularly from Russia, but also from our other adversaries, this is not the time to destabilise NATO and to undermine our collective security.
Is that what Donald Trump's doing?
We're really clear about where we stand. We're really clear with the United States about where we stand on Greenland. And what you've seen from the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary, not just in relation to the fast-moving events in Venezuela, but more generally when it comes to our relationship with the United States and actually diplomacy and foreign policy more generally, the Prime Minister chooses what to say, how to say it and when to say it very carefully. And what he always has at the forefront of his mind is how does he make sure that he uses his influence and leverage in a way that, first and foremost, works to our national interest, whether economic interest or security interest, and then for the collective interest as well of global security and the rules-based system which we've seen disintegrating before our eyes.
Because I guess that's the case with the defence, if you like. He's saying, look, you know, we can't say all this stuff because we've got to keep Donald Trump on side. Do you buy that, or do you think, actually, we've got to be a bit tougher now?
I think generally I agree, but not completely. So I think it was really interesting when you looked at what Canada was saying immediately after, or Japan, or France, or Germany, or the EU, or Britain. It looked like there was a coordinated response, which was, we stand up for international law, and there must be a democratic transition in Venezuela. And that's what they all said. So it was kind of coordinated. And I understand that. But what I think they should have done was do those two things and say, but she shouldn't have done this. And that I think we should be doing with our allies. And that I think is a strong position. I'm not saying we go out on our own, but I am saying that it is in Britain's interests to not allow international law to be undermined. Because not just because we wrote most of international law, but also because we're a medium-sized country and it is in our interest to not allow the big powers to be able to stomp all over the world and do what they want.
There's one other question I need to ask you, because Sky News has discovered that the current interim president, former Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, was sanctioned by the UK in 2020. And this is for undermining democracy and the rule of law in Venezuela. I mean, is she a fit person to be running?
Yeah, I mean, she's sanctioned by, not just by Britain, but I think by the States, and, you know, those sanctions have yet to be lifted. Listen, I mean, Venezuela, the terrible regime in Venezuela, for which I have been publicly opposed for a very long time, even when I was in Jeremy Corbyn's government, and it wasn't terribly popular, I can tell you. But, you know, I've absolutely been, you know, against Venezuela. It's not just not just the leader. I mean, people misunderstand, you know, states when they look at that. They have a lot of generals. I mean, many more generals than most countries do, and a lot of them have a deep interest in the economy, let's at least put it that way, right? And a lot of them are also sanctioned, and there's a lot of them have warrants out for their arrest because of their behaviour. And then there is the behaviour of the judiciary. There is a very sizable chunk of the establishment at the top of Venezuela. Now, if you're going to change Venezuela, you don't just snatch Maduro in the middle of the night. There is much more work that needs to be done. And that is the reality. And I'm sorry to be so depressing about this, but, you know, if there's going to be change in Venezuela, it must be much more fundamental. And in fact, what we've seen is the snatching of the leader, you know, and then an attempt to intimidate, and an attempt to intimidate in order to get access to natural resources and to get access to oil.
Quick final question. Will Keir Starmer be Prime Minister this time next year?
Yes, I think so, yes.
And you hope he will be?
I think that we should just stop talking about this and get on with leading Britain and being a Labour government and doing all the things that we said that we were going to do in our manifesto.
So you hope he will be?
Yeah, we need to get on with it.
Dame Emily Thornbury, thanks so much for joining us.
Not at all, it's a pleasure.
There was a slight slip of the tongue in your prior answer when you said when you were part of Jeremy Corbyn's government.
Yeah, no, OK. Right.
Not quite, not quite.
Oh, yeah. Not quite. No, much closer in 2017 than people thought.
For sure. Anyway, thanks so much for joining us.
Not at all, it's a pleasure.
Good to see you. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking about the fact that it's January the 6th today and get a US take on all of that latest news. We'll be right back.
the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Roger and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started. Good morning. Let's get you up to speed with the news this morning, shall we? Because Donald Trump's doubled down on his claim that Greenland should come under US control, despite warnings that could destroy NATO.
It comes after former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro pleaded not guilty to drugs and weapons charges in a New York court following his capture by US forces.
Meanwhile, Keir Starmer is due to meet members of the Coalition of the Willing in Paris today. It's all about discussing security guarantees in a Ukraine peace deal.
Almost the entire UK is covered by weather warnings for snow and ice this morning. Yesterday, snowy conditions did see hundreds of schools close and some flights cancelled, alongside other travel disruptions.
Now, the high street chains, Claire's and also the original factory shop, are both being put into administration. So it's putting around 2,500 staff in the UK at risk of redundancy. We can speak to somebody who's broken the story on Claire's Accessories, our city editor, Mark Kleinman. I mean, it's a sad day, isn't it, for the British high street?
Yeah, we're 6 days into the new year, Sophie, and already we've got our first retail casualties. Claire's and the original factory shop, both owned by the same investment group, both changed hands last year, and both victims of the same set of circumstances that we've seen besetting the British high street over a long period of time. In the case of Claire's, that actually went into administration last year when its US parent filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. It was sold out of administration, about 150 stores remaining, about 1,300 staff. The problem there has been that the landlords, the owners of many of Claire's best stores, have reclaimed the sites, leaving the rest of the business not commercially viable. The original factory shop, probably less well known, but a discount retailer, mainly located in retail parks. But again, about 150 shops still trading. That has also been hit by very difficult trading conditions, weakening consumer confidence. And interestingly, in the case of both of these retail casualties, the investors behind them really complaining about the additional payroll tax costs imposed by the government in recent budgets. So these are conditions that are by no means unique to these two chains. We are going to see more retail casualties early in the new year. A couple of other candidates for that ignominious end are LK Bennett, the fashion retailer beloved by the Princess of Wales. That's about to go into administration. And I suspect we'll see some bigger names as well, like Poundland, which may also be back in trouble in the very near future.
It's interesting they specifically talked about the government as well. It's really interesting.
It's interesting you listed so many there, because I was going to say, is what's happening to Claire's representative of the pressure on retailers more widely, or are there some strong points?
There are definitely some strong points. We always see winners from the Christmas trading period. In fact, we've had evidence of one big winner this morning, Next, which has been a massive success story in the UK retail sector over the last 20 years or so. They've upgraded their profit forecast for the full year. Lord Wolfson, the chief executive, says that they now expect to make about £1.1 billion in full-year pre-tax profit for the year. So a big success story. And in fact, Next, over the last few years, has become a specialist at buying distressed retail brands, buying the intellectual property. So Next is likely to end up buying LK Bennett. It's in talks to buy Russell & Bromley, the family-owned shoe retailer at the moment. So, and over the next few days, Wilfred, we will see evidence of some other winners. I expect Sainsbury's to have performed pretty strongly over the Christmas period. And we'll also get trading figures from Marks and Spencer, which will be a slightly more mixed picture, I expect, because M&S was hit by this big cyber attack last year. Its food sales over Christmas understood to have been particularly strong. Clothing will have been a more difficult picture for M&S over recent weeks, but there are still some winners coming from the sector.
It's interesting the difference between the kind of winners and losers. Do you think a lot of this is how well businesses have adapted to the kind of online climate? Because I'm thinking about, as a consumer, ordering from Next is the website is kind of like a joy. It's like next day delivery. It's super easy. Claire's is like a kind of jumble sale, very hard to work out what's on there, what you can... Do you think that's partly it?
It's definitely part of the picture, there's no doubt about that. Another part of the story here, though, is that the larger retailers which have done well are much better placed to absorb the higher costs, the inflationary costs that we've seen in the retail industry over recent years. And some of these mid-sized chains, like Claire's and the Original Factory Shop, much less well placed to absorb those higher costs that retailers have been facing.
Mark, great stuff as always. Thanks so much. Mark Kleiman there. Now, today marks 5 years since the January the 6th attack on the US Capitol. It became a moment in US history that's defined politics there ever since.
A subsequent investigation into what happened on that day by the House Select Committee and the Department for Justice determined that a speech by President Trump elsewhere in DC was the primary driver of events that day.
Now it is up to Congress to confront this egregious assault on our democracy. And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol. And we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
President Trump and his supporters have consistently pointed out that his calls were for peaceful and patriotic action. But weeks of claims of a stolen election had also spurred thousands to storm the home of US lawmakers.
Well, one of the rioters, the 35-year-old Ashley Babbitt, died after being shot by Capitol Police, and one officer also died the following day, having suffered 2 strokes. Several officers subsequently died by suicide.
Joining us to discuss is Scott Lucas, Professor of International Politics at University College Dublin's Clinton Institute. Thanks so much for joining us. Is there still a legacy of this? I mean, it's amazing to think how long ago it is now, but 5 years on?
I'm sure there's a legacy. This was a coup attempt, and we need to call it what it was, by a man named Donald Trump to try to hold on to power illegally. He did not specifically call on his supporters on that January 6th to attack the Capitol, but he told them to, quote, fight like hell to block the legal confirmation of the president-elect Joe Biden by Congress. And he left open what fight like hell meant, because in the days up to January 6th, as we know from multiple sources, including the congressional investigations, including the investigation by the special prosecutor Jack Smith, members of the Trump camp met with the organizers of the rallies, including that rally in front of the Capitol that stormed it. We also know that, of course, in the run-up to this, that Trump had spread months of falsehoods, disinformation, had tried to hijack the Justice Department to declare the election invalid, and had even discussed with certain advisors, like Michael Flynn, the discussion of martial law in the United States. All of that is on the table. What you're really asking me, I think, Wilfred, is whether people will continue to remember this or whether this will be buried. Because, of course, in the subsequent 5 years, and with Donald Trump back in the presidency, the attempt by him and his supporters is to turn him from being the potential aggressor on that day into the victim.
I guess the other thing you'd have to raise is the extent to which his opponents, and we could put that in the Justice Department, we could put it on the other side of the political aisle, you could put it specifically towards President Biden, failed in their attempts to hold him to account where that was warranted in the years that followed.
Well, I mean, we can start off with the facts in terms of where we were as of late 2024, and that is that despite the attempt by most Republicans in Congress to block any effective investigation, that you had certain, I would say, courageous Republicans who joined colleagues in getting those investigations to put the information on the record. And of course, we had the indictment of Donald Trump on those attempts to overturn the election, in effect to defraud the US people, that were being led by Jack Smith. And had Donald Trump not been elected in November of 2024, he would have likely stood trial. However, of course, he won that election. And once he is back in the White House and covered in large part by a Supreme Court decision that says he has immunity, then he could not only quash the investigations, he could actually turn this around and try to prosecute Jack Smith, threaten him with trial. What's interesting is that, yes, the effort does continue for accountability. Only last month, Jack Smith filed a deposition when he was summoned to testify before Congress. That deposition was released last week, and again reiterated that, yes, Donald Trump did try to incite his supporters to block a legal process, in effect violating the U.S. Constitution.
I guess my point is that 4 years is a long time. And to your point, the Supreme Court did make the decision they did. Of course, always worth noting as well that President Biden did decide to pardon his own son. So it's all quite complicated. Just wanted to talk about current events, if we could, because I think it's very pertinent. And what is your assessment now that it is clear that President Trump is framing things as arresting an individual as opposed to a foreign act of war, or the precise wording that you'll know better than me. What is your assessment of the legality or not of what happened over the weekend in Venezuela?
It's illegal. I mean, we need to state this, that whatever spin comes out of the White House, that this was a law enforcement operation, that even if they had filed an indictment in 2020 against Nicolas Maduro on what legal experts have said is relatively weak evidence, but even if they file that indictment, they cannot enforce that indictment outside of U.S. territory. That is why we have things like extradition agreements. That is why if you want to seek international charges, say for drug smuggling, you have the International Criminal Court. You cannot go into a sovereign country and, no matter how bad, how awful the leadership is, kidnap the leader of that country and take them away. Because once you do that, any country can use any pretext to kidnap a foreign leader. China could go into Taiwan and take the president, saying that that president doesn't recognize a one China policy. Vladimir Putin can continue his efforts to assassinate Vladimir Zelensky in Ukraine, claiming that he has violated Russian law. So no, we do need to start off with the basics here and say that whatever the spin on this is, however this plays out in that New York courtroom, this was an egregious violation of international law, as the United Nations leadership has made clear.
Scott Lucas, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Now, you might have an opinion on our next story, because people over 70 could be forced to take an eye test if they want to keep driving. It's all part of the government's road safety strategy due out tomorrow, and we can talk to Saja about this. So what's going on?
So it looks like more rules for drivers. Some people might say driving is already complicated with so many signs and rules, and now rules coming in potentially, particularly for over 70s, but there are rules for others. But let's start with the over 70s first. So mandatory eye checks, this is something that is being discussed, and that will be in addition to the separate rules they already have, which is, renewing driver's licenses every 3 years as opposed to 10, which is the situation for the rest of us. There's also discussions about cognitive tests that are going to be considered. We don't know the details around that, but it could be things like how well you gauge distances, your reflexes, your sort of orientation and things like that. And This is all part of the new road safety strategy that is due to be published tomorrow, and it is the first of its kind for over a decade. The government says the aim is to allow drivers to be independent still while they reduce deaths and serious injuries. And that is because a quarter of drivers killed in collisions last year were over the age of 70, which is a really high number. And the government's target is to cut road deaths and serious injuries by 65% by 2035. And there are some reports that the strategy could also include other changes for the rest of us, including penalty points for not wearing seatbelts, upfront fines for offenders to rise up to £600, and greater penalties for driving without insurance, all due to go into consultation.
So, great stuff. Thanks so much. Time for a quick look at the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Now, it's going to be freezing all week. It's going to be cold all week. Further wintry hazards, which I guess is snow, hail, sleet, ice, possible and more widespread snow and coastal gales towards the weekend as well. So we've got snow and ice warnings issued, another amber covering northern Scotland today. And you should expect an extra 5 to 10 centimetres of snow there. There's also a widespread frost bringing some icy patches to the country too. Scotland, Ireland and Northern Ireland will see rain, sleet and mainly hill snow taking over this morning. England and Wales, though, look generally fine.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Up next, we're going to be speaking about the latest technology trends you need to be aware of for 2026. Don't go anywhere.
First Minister, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to see you. How are you feeling?
Looking forward to getting into the parliamentary chamber.
Are you any further forward to making a decision?
No, it's an important day today.
All of the claims were in line with my parliamentary duties, so I'm making that clear to you, Conor.
He was a Scot through and through.
He was a very good politician.
Alex Salmond was controversial, he was a disruptor, but above all, he was respected.
Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
His face said it all.
My intention to stand down as party leader.
This is now a storm with deadly consequences. How are they feeling?
They're a bit scared at the minute. We've been told to evacuate.
How are you feeling?
Devastated.
Hundreds of homes were wiped out by flooding. I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent.
It was probably the darkest time in my life.
Scott is 5 years sober after a cocaine addiction left him close to death.
Scotland has a shameful record. Worse than England, the worst in Europe. Why not just say you failed? Because then you might get more respect from families who've lost loved ones.
This is where one of the UK's most prolific rapists thought he'd got away with murder.
Sky News can reveal that former sex workers had told police he was sexually violent.
My Emma.
Free wherever you get your news.
It's over, isn't it?
The Americans say he is Rossi, a fraudster.
This has been one of the most bizarre cases ever heard in a courtroom in this country.
A dangerous murderer.
Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Ennis after this?
She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars.
By doing the right thing, it's destroyed your life.
They terrorised me. They intimidated me.
Sky News, the full story first.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Welcome back. A bit of breaking news. We've been talking about the changing managers over the course of the last couple of days in the Premier League. Well, Strasbourg boss Liam Rosenior has been confirmed he will be the new head coach of Chelsea. He's 41 and, of course, he is currently the manager of Strasbourg, which is owned by the same owners of Chelsea. So it's a sort of inter-group move of someone that the owners of Chelsea kind of know quite well. And, of course, that comes after Enzo Maresca was relieved of his duties over the weekend.
Yeah.
Last week.
Bad year for existing Premier League managers, 2026 so far, so many of them on the way out. Now, when it comes to technology, it feels like we're going through one of those periods in history where everything's in fast forward, in particular, of course, because of AI. So we thought we'd take a moment and have a closer look at what technology trends are expected to really take off in 2026.
Let's bring in technology journalist Will Guyatt. Will, great to have you with us. What is the sort of headline of your expectation on the way we all embrace AI? Is it just going to continue being asking quick, simple questions, or is it going to get much deeper than that?
I think it will eventually get deeper. The Consumer Electronics Show starts in Las Vegas today, and everything for the next 12 to 18 months ahead gets revealed there. And you can guarantee that AI is squeezed into absolutely everything, including bird boxes. So I think there's going to be a huge amount of technology there on display, vying for our attention, which means we're going to be accessing AI services more and more. Perhaps the most interesting thing about this year, though, is something that's been apparent in the last couple of weeks. OpenAI, the people who make ChatGPT, have come forward and put a forward order for 40% of the entire RAM inventory made globally this year, which is going to cause huge implications to the rest of the world of technology. Everything we buy has RAM in it these days. Cars, computers, TVs, phones, you name it, it's got memory in it. And the cost of memory is going to rocket as a result of this. In the last week alone, we've seen cost of RAM, which you put into a computer, double, and that hasn't happened for a number of years. And we're even hearing rumors, not confirmed, that companies like Samsung, who make memory, can't even guarantee a supply to their consumer unit for smartphones this year. Not yet confirmed by Samsung, but this means potentially devices get less powerful this year, or companies delay plans to release stuff. And when you put that alongside tariffs and that sort of stuff in the US, it makes the price of consumer technology, and all of these companies going to CES this week, they won't be able to announce their prices because everything is just so volatile.
So interesting, isn't it? All that kind of stuff under play, and then obviously these incredible kind of pioneering things that are transforming how we use things. I saw about Lego debuting this kind of smart play system that reacts as you play, and I read the headline and it slightly blew my mind. Can you explain what's going on?
Yeah, as a Lego nerd, I'm excited about this. It's the biggest thing that they've done in the last 50 years. It's essentially bringing microcomputing into a Lego block. So they've done various bits and pieces before to bring sound, motion, and those sorts of things to Lego. But you're essentially now bringing a small microcomputer in a brick into the world of Lego. And that's going to be simple things like making the sound effect of a lightsaber if you've got a Star Wars lightsaber, or you might actually start being able to do some more intelligent stuff with it, train tracks, those kind of things, stuff that kids are really going to love. And this is a really great introduction into the world of sort of tech and engineering. And it'll be very interesting to see whether it's very, very tightly controlled, or whether Lego go, here's how it works, fill your boots, nerds, go and work out what you can do with it and do really exciting stuff with it. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that this year, because it was announced just yesterday.
I noticed that people are talking about foldable TVs now. I know we had foldable phones, which sort of makes sense if you want to keep it in your pocket. Why do we need a foldable TV?
I don't know if either of you have got a yacht, but it's the type of thing that you probably need for need for one of those, because it seems like it's the ultimate flex for 2026. I can see them being in really high-end places, luxury hotels, those kind of things. Ultimately, though, this technology that's created for really big screens turns up in everything else eventually. So we will see foldable screens in our tablets and our mobile devices, probably in the next 5 to 10 years. But right now, you can roll up a 120-inch LED TV, much like you could a rug. So some people might love it, others won't really see the point in it. Tellies are getting bigger this year. That's one actual interesting thing I can tell you. Samsung have debuted a 130-inch screen, and that's going to be the biggest they've got. And you need quite some wall estate for that in your home.
Well, I think we've got one
so
here.
I think that's Yahtzee.
Yeah, like our screens.
Yeah, I think ours, this must be bigger.
Yeah, look at this. Latest in tech.
Yeah,
Can put all sorts in the screen.
Yeah.
Bigger and
Amazing.
Well, great stuff. Thanks so much. We appreciate it. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Have you seen those foldable phones?
Well, I'm just thinking about the old Nokias. The old sort of flip phones.
Oh, yeah, those. Not that
I think
one.
it's probably a bit different.
No, exactly. No, it was just like doubles your screen size, but it never worked quite perfectly, so kind of it didn't quite catch on. I just think there's almost too much tech in our pocket.
Yeah,
already.
quite like the Lego, though, I have to say.
Yeah, we are out of time for this hour. When we come back, we'll have all of the day's top stories for you.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you? People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Good morning. It is 9 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well.
A defiant defence. The Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro says he's a decent man as he appears in court.
Donald Trump sets his eyes on Greenland, saying he needs the territory for national security right now.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer will travel to Paris later today for a meeting of what's been described as the coalition of the willing, hoping to finalise Ukraine's peace deal.
Also ahead, we'll be joined by 4 adventurers rowing 3,000 miles across the Atlantic. They're in the middle of their journey. They're raising money for charity, and we'll connect with them.
And they're hopefully not being affected by our next story. More snow on the way, wintry weather causing travel delays across the UK.
Very good morning to you and welcome. Well, events following America's capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro have been moving fast, and overnight that continued as Donald Trump warned that the US needs to take Greenland, in his words, for security now.
Well, there's lots to unpack here, so let's try and do it for you, shall we? Starting off with what the US president said. He told NBC News that he was very serious about moving ahead with a plan to take control of the territory. He said, "I think that Greenland is very important for the national security of the United States, Europe and other parts of the free world." So that is going on with Donald Trump. In the meantime, it came as Delcy Rodriguez was sworn in as Venezuela's interim president. She called the capture of Nicolas Maduro a kidnapping. And over in New York, here's the man himself, Nicolas Maduro. He was defiant as he appeared in court in New York, declaring himself a decent man. Well, US correspondent Martha Kellner was in court for that appearance, and this is her report.
What a difference 3 days makes. Nicolas Maduro, snatched from the opulence of his Venezuelan palace, now being frog-marched away from one of America's most notorious prisons. From president to defendant in one long weekend. Then a breakfast-time helicopter ride into Manhattan. But this is no pleasure tour for Maduro, heading to his first court hearing. Maduro is being held alongside his wife, former First Lady Cilia Flores, seen here being removed from the helicopter after him. The world waiting to see the former Venezuelan president inside the US justice system. Maduro pleaded not guilty to charges including narco-terrorism and possessing machine guns and destructive devices. No cameras were allowed inside the courtroom, but I was in there a matter of meters from Nicolas Maduro, and it was incredibly dramatic. I heard him coming before I saw him, the jangle of his shackles as he came into the room, and he wished everyone a happy new year. He said it 3 or 4 times. He was then asked by the judge to confirm his identity, at which point Nicolas Maduro responded. He said, "I am President Nicolas Maduro Moros, President of the Republic of Venezuela. Here, kidnapped since January the 3rd, I was captured in my home in Caracas, Venezuela." The judge then interrupted him, saying, "There will be a time and a place to go into this. At this point, I only want to know one thing. Are you Nicolas Maduro Moros?" There was another astounding moment right at the end of this hearing as Maduro got up to walk out of the room. A gentleman in the public gallery stood up and addressed him directly. That man is Pedro Rojas, a Venezuelan in exile. He tells me he was imprisoned in the country in 2019 and now lives in the US. What did you say to Mr. Maduro? You stood up at the end of that hearing.
Okay, I speak English, I understand. So, I told Nicolas Maduro Moros that he will pay, that the United States of America will bring him to justice, that starting today, 5th of January 2026, the great age of Venezuela begins.
He looked at you, didn't he? Straight in the eyes. How did that feel?
Nicolas Maduro told me that he was innocent and that he was a man of God. I told him that we're also men of God, because we've never attacked the Venezuelan church, as he has done on numerous occasions.
God willing, he'll spend the rest of his days in prison.
Unite with them to fight against our common enemy.
Rival protests outside court reflecting the different views Venezuelans in America have about this US intervention. Some are jubilant.
Best day of my life. It's not only what I feel, it's all Venezuela feel. That people over there is no. They are no.
Are you worried what happens to Venezuela next? That there's not much of a plan?
Venezuela will be great. Venezuela will be great. Because America support Venezuela.
Others are cynical.
We know that the real reason that the U.S. wants to kidnap Maduro and orchestrate the next phase of regime change is for resources. It's for oil, it's for minerals. Nothing about it is for the freedom of the Venezuelan people.
After the hearing concluded, Maduro in a motorcade was taken back to prison. His next hearing set for March. The consequences of his capture are unknown. Martha Kellner, Sky News, New York.
Across the Americas, leaders are now asking questions about who possibly could be next. President Trump told reporters on Air Force One 36 hours ago that Colombia was run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States. Meanwhile, in Mexico, there was also comments where the President Trump said that drugs are pouring through the country and America is going to have to do something about it. But perhaps getting the most focus is the semi-autonomous Danish territory, Greenland, which was also highlighted by the US President. He raised the prospect of annexation once again, citing its strategic location for defence and mineral wealth. Well, this was the Danish Prime Minister's response.
Firstly, I believe that the American president should be taken seriously when he says that he wants Greenland. But I also want to make it clear that if the United States chooses to attack another NATO country militarily, then everything stops.
And now I guess after that, the pressure really on other European leaders about how they respond to this, how firmly they back Greenland, but also how firmly they do or don't criticise Donald Trump. We spoke to the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, earlier. This is what he had to say.
At a time when we can see the security of NATO members and the alliance at threat, particularly from Russia, but also from our other adversaries, this is not the time to destabilise NATO and to undermine our collective security.
Is that what Donald Trump's doing?
We're really clear about where we stand. We're really clear with the United States about where we stand on Greenland. And what you've seen from the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary, not just in relation to the fast-moving events in Venezuela, but more generally when it comes to our relationship with the United States and actually diplomacy and foreign policy more generally, the Prime Minister chooses what to say, how to say it, and when to say it, very carefully, and what he always has at the forefront of his mind is how does he make sure that he uses his influence and leverage in a way that first and foremost works to our national interest, whether economic interest or security interest, and then for the collective interest as well of global security and the rules-based system which we've seen disintegrating before our eyes.
Wes Streeting there, I think, pretty clearly showing the tightrope they're trying to walk.
Yeah, can I just say, though, I thought Emily Thornberry was going to come out fighting to say, why haven't they done so much more? She kind of said, why haven't they done a little bit more? It wasn't, like, that critical. She also didn't take the bait of, should the Prime Minister step down, and was quite supportive from the backbenches for it. So, weirdly, it's like the big error was your interview yesterday, as opposed to what they ended up doing.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
I think there is some genuine understanding of the tightrope that the UK government is having to walk, not least, of course, because they are obviously currently in Paris trying to strong-arm the states into getting the Ukraine peace deal over the line.
Which allows us to make a seamless transition to Paris and bring in Ali Bunkel, who's there. Ahead of Ali, how many leaders are we expecting?
We think 27, actually. We were just trying to do that calculation. But normally this is a meeting. I mean, the Coalition of the Willing meetings happen quite regularly and often through video conferencing. But we think 27 leaders will be here today in the French capital. Certainly the main ones. Obviously, Emmanuel Macron, who's going to be the host of the meeting. Volodymyr Zelensky will be here, Keir Starmer, Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor as well, the NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte, Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, has flown in. The Americans will be represented by Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. Marco Rubio won't be here. The Americans say for obvious reasons because of what's going on with Venezuela. But it is high level. And it is not normally so high level, at least in person, which is kind of leading to the possibility that there could be potentially something substantial to come out of today's meeting. Normally when they meet, it doesn't necessarily yield an awful lot of progress, at least not publicly, but we'll see whether that's different today. I think there's a couple of main discussion points that they want to try and make progress on, how a ceasefire in Ukraine, if ever they got to that stage, how that would be monitored, what kind of support would be given to Ukraine's military, what kind of multinational reassurance force in Ukraine would take shape and how that would work, who would contribute towards it, and support for Ukraine if a ceasefire was ever violated in the future. So those are kind of the discussion points that we've spoken about later today. It all really sort of starts to move just after lunchtime, meetings and bilateral meetings along the sidelines throughout the day, but it really starts to gather pace after lunchtime and into the early evening.
Ali, do you think that the focus really will be primarily on getting this Ukraine deal done, or are they distracted, these European leaders, these NATO leaders, by events in the Americas?
Look, I mean, particularly, I think Greenland for sure will be the elephant in the room. I think European leaders, when it comes to Venezuela, have struggled to work out what their position is. I mean, on the one hand, probably nobody shedding a tear for the removal of Nicolás Maduro, but on the other hand, obviously questions being asked of European leaders about whether or not they have concerns regarding the legality of what President Trump and US forces did in Caracas. But, you know, that's almost kind of, it's moving so quickly, focus is now shifting to Greenland, given the repeated statements, really kind of strong statements coming out of the US administration from sort of Trump downwards about a perceived claim to the territory of Greenland. And that has put European leaders, many of whom will be here, in a real bind. Of course, they stand behind Denmark and they stand behind Denmark's sovereignty over Greenland. But at the same time, nobody wants to say anything that could rile President Trump, knowing that, you know, that is very easily done. And in order to get the Americans, or keep the Americans on side with the process of trying to get peace in Ukraine, they need the Americans on board. And so they have that delicate balance between supporting an ally, Denmark, and trying to make sure the Americans don't do anything with regards to Greenland, but at the same time wanting to make sure that they remain friendly with the White House.
Ali, as always, thanks so much. We'll be back out with Ali, of course, throughout the day, all that all-important gathering in Paris.
Let's talk weather next, because it is freezing this morning, as you probably realised if you've gone outside or looked out the window. There are snow showers, wind, ice, unsurprisingly causing travel chaos across parts of the United Kingdom.
Let's speak to our North of England correspondent, Charlotte Leeming, who's braved the cold for us this morning in North Yorkshire. And Charlotte, what's the balance there between people enjoying the lovely snow and sort of travel chaos?
Well, I think that's the thing, isn't it? Good morning to you. That if you've nowhere really to get to, this weather could be quite nice, can't it? If you've got a leisurely pace, we've got lots of dog walkers just chatting and walking leisurely around the Tarn, the lake here. But those people trying to get back to normality, back to routine after the Christmas holidays, after 2 weeks off, are finding it difficult. We've got a second day of a lot of disruption, a lot of school closures, and again, particularly in Scotland, in the north of Scotland, where there's an amber weather warning in place by the Met Office. That's when they really say you can expect a lot of disruption, travel, there's the potential for risk to life and also power cuts. So again, they're experiencing that. Here in Yorkshire, this is normally a lake. It's completely frozen over. The roads are icy. We've had some snow showers as well, and there's also some travel disruption. In fact, there's not many parts of the UK that don't have a warning in place, a yellow weather warning, which again is to say to people, please be prepared, allow extra time for your journeys. There's a lot of ice on the roads. The gritters, the ploughs have been out. Just beyond the expanse of white there, that is one of the main runways of Leeds Bradford Airport. We're high up here above Leeds. We've seen the gritters out on the runway there, and the planes have been coming and going as normal, but certainly we're seeing train delays, problems on transport networks as well. LNER have just put on X that there's major train disruption between Edinburgh and Aberdeen. So heavy snowfall up there again overnight, causing major problems. And the message always is to really check with your airlines, with your train operators, your bus operators before you travel. You can expect some disruption today. And we know that this is not going to end. This cold snap is continuing for a few days. It's heading south as well. We're expecting later in the week, as well as the snow and the ice, we're going to have a mix of the strong winds and rainfall as well. So it could be a very tricky week this week. And people, I think, sort of desperate to get back to the routine after 2 weeks on the festive holidays. Motoring organisations very much saying, please make sure your cars are roadworthy, that they're all right. We've just seen a woman in the car park there. A car wouldn't start, so we'll be helping her later on to try and get home. But it's just the practical things when you set off on your journey. Make sure you've got lots of layers on, a hot flask of tea, that your phone is fully charged, you've got drinks and snacks, because this is a day again where you are more likely to break down and the services will be under a lot of pressure. But, you know, it's an absolutely beautiful sight here. People come up to walk their dogs, to look at the wildlife. But, you know, it just goes to show the grip of this Arctic air mass at the moment, that the lakes are frozen and once again lots of disruption, particularly in northern Scotland. But later in the week, definitely heading south. And we think a very low temperature overnight. The lowest was in Norfolk, minus 12 Celsius. So just gives you an idea of the weather, this wintry weather. It's not going anywhere just yet.
Lovely stuff. We're going to let you go. Just go and help that lady in the car park.
And Lottie's a mechanic. I didn't know that.
Amazing.
A lady of many talents.
Not me, the camera crew.
Amazing.
Well, still.
Thanks very
talented
much.
team.
Is it always? Now, you've been sending us your pictures of the beautiful snow, lots of animals, I should say. Oh, look at the wrong screen. It's your side, isn't it?
There we go. Look at that. That's Angus.
Stunning. That's a gorgeous picture of Angus. Kelly sent it in. She's in Aberdeenshire. Lots of beautiful snow there. Fantastic
Snap. And we've got this one from Caroline, which is of Betty, also looking very cute in the snow with a cold nose.
Linda's garden, I'm thinking. Wonder what football team she supports. Any guesses?
Can't work it out. Great picture there. And then Laura in Sunderland sent us this of her German Shepherd Heidi, who's also got another cold nose. There we go.
So fantastic. Cute. Love it. Keep sending us them to us today, mornings@sky.uk.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be getting the Conservatives' view of all of the latest movements as it relates to international relations with the coalition at the Willing meeting and, of course, issues in the Americas. We'll be right back.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us?
Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office.
Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you? People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Well, it should be said, of course, it goes without saying that the year so far has been an extraordinary one on the international stage with Venezuela and now, of course, what Donald Trump's been saying about other nations, including Colombia and, of course, Greenland. To get more on the story, we're joined by the Shadow Defence Secretary, James Cartledge. Good to have you with us. So overnight, Donald Trump has doubled down on his threat to take over Greenland. He said, we need Greenland for national security. We need it for national security right now. What's your response?
Well, I mean, we take actually a pretty similar view to the government on this, which is it's very clear Greenland is part of Denmark. Denmark is a sovereign country. It is a close ally of the United Kingdom and, of course, a NATO member. And so, you know, we would, as to echo, dare I say, what the Prime Minister said, we'd stand by them. And what I would say is, you know, whatever talk there's been on Greenland, the US actually has always been very strong in supporting NATO. If you look at what Rubio said last April at the NATO conference...
So Donald Trump's always been strong in supporting NATO?
I'm talking about...
America.
About the Secretary of State. And at that meeting, he expressed the strong support of President Trump. Now, you know, obviously we want to see the strongest possible NATO. What I think, and I've said this on your programme before, what we do really need to focus on is the countries in NATO need to do more for their own defence, and I think that will strengthen our position.
You said that the US has always been strong in supporting NATO, and you quote Marco Rubio, which I accept, but Donald Trump, the guy leading the United States, has not always been strong on NATO, has he? You accept that? There's been a lot of concern over what his attitude to NATO actually is.
But well, what I was quoting was what their Secretary of State said at a NATO meeting, and he said that President Trump, who was speaking on his behalf, strongly backs NATO. I've not seen or heard President Trump saying, he's against NATO. The US is a key part of it. It's integral. But of course, what President Trump has said very clearly, and where I actually agree with him strongly, is that NATO members need to do more, need to spend more. And I think that the lesson from all of this, I'm bound to say, and not just because I'm Shadow Defence Secretary, but the lesson is we do need to spend more on defence, not just the UK, but other countries in NATO, and do it in a way that shows seriousness. So about pace of rearmament as well, because the world is getting, unfortunately, less stable.
Can I be honest with you? Because over the last kind of 24 hours or so, I have been, quite taken aback, I'll be honest, by politicians from both Labour and the Conservatives being very reluctant to criticise Donald Trump, who has said he wants to take over Greenland. And the Danish Prime Minister has come forward...
Did he use the phrase take over?
We need Greenland for national security. We need it right now. He says, he's gone on to say, I think Greenland's very important for the national security of the United States. I mean, he's been saying this for a long time as well. This is not just comments. He's been making these comments.
I get that, but he's not said we're going to take over Greenland, which is slightly different wording. But look, I totally understand why you're saying that. But equally...
Should he be making these threats?
Your point was, about reluctance to criticise. First of all, the United States is our closest ally, very important ally of the United Kingdom. Secondly, actually, if you take the Venezuela situation, whatever one thinks of the method, and I have to say militarily it was a spectacular operation, it would appear, there are benefits from that in terms of, Maduro's now gone. He was a terrible leader for Venezuela. What I think is most important from all of this is that Venezuela now has a chance to transition to a stable democracy. Now, that is not straightforward, but I think that should be the top priority. And what I would want to see from the Prime Minister and the Labour government is using all diplomatic means to ensure that that can happen. And I think there's a consensus on that point.
Is it important for us not to criticise Donald Trump too much? Because, frankly, we need him when it comes to Ukraine.
No, I mean, we shouldn't be gratuitously criticising for the sake of it. Obviously, if there are aspects of American policy we disagree with, we should be free to say that.
What about saying they need Greenland? I mean, that's
Well, I just, look...
You don't take him seriously, is that what you're saying?
I think that, you know, he may have his own way of saying things, let's be honest, right, as a president. I judge them by the substantive action. US remains as a committed member of NATO. When I go back to what Rubio was saying and what the actual actions of the US are, they take part in NATO exercises. Rubio said in that speech they're going to be doing more than ever. To be fair, and this is what I was saying, his caveat was, as long as NATO countries do their bit. And I think that is totally fair. And I think this will, the tension here will reduce if NATO members, including those countries that are not spending anything like enough, all do their bit as well.
We've, of course, got this Ukraine meeting going on today, the coalition of the willing in Paris. President Zelensky is saying that they are 90% there on a peace deal for Ukraine. How optimistic or not are you at this stage?
Well, I mean, I've worn my Ukraine badge every day since the all-out invasion, and I desperately want to see peace. It's been a terrible war, terrible casualties, you know, kidnapping of children, etc. We all want it to end, but it has to end on a sustainable basis, a lasting peace. So the critical thing from today is security guarantees. I'm not going to prejudge what is discussed. We need to see what countries are going to do for that. But my biggest concern is, my worry is that the guy in the Kremlin doesn't want peace, not seriously. I have not seen anything that suggests that. I think my fear is it suits Putin to have a war economy. It suits him to be at war in this way. And I think in whatever we do today, and I welcome what's happening, it's very important, nevertheless, in parallel, we must be clear-eyed to the Russian threat and exert all possible economic pressure, sanctions, etc., on Putin so that he realises he has no choice but to end this war.
One of the sticking points, of course, over territory. Any deal
right.
where Ukraine has to give up territory that it currently holds, would that be unacceptable to you?
Well, look, obviously no one wants to see that. But I think it's, you know, to try and sort of prejudge the detail of any negotiation is difficult. I've been clear from the beginning, we're going to stand by Ukraine, and that any deal must be acceptable to them. It mustn't have one foisted on it. And in particular, and you know, I've said this every time I've appeared on your programme, on every other on Ukraine, the thing from our point of view and for our allies, if Russia is in some way seen to win from the settlement, that would be terrible for the peace of the world because of the message it would send to our adversaries. So we must be clear-eyed about all this, but I hope we see progress today. I think the Ukrainians certainly deserve it.
OK, thank you very much indeed. James Cartledge speaking to us there. Coming up next, we're going to be catching up with 4 guys who are currently rowing 3,000 miles across the Atlantic for charity. And when I say currently, I mean currently, as in they are on the sea right now.
Welcome back. 4 adventurers are rowing 3,000 miles across the Atlantic, raising funds for charities tackling motor neuron disease and other conditions. And you might remember, we were joined by them before, but rather boringly, they just sat around the studio desk. This was before they set off about a month ago.
And we promised that we'd try and catch up with them mid-row, which, fingers crossed, due to the powers of technology, we can do now. Amazing! Look at this.
We are live.
Ollie, Stuart, Tom and Julian.
Wilf, how are we?
We're very well, very relaxed, sitting here. How much more importantly, how are you doing, Ollie?
The crew are fantastic. So you've got, just behind, you've got Stuart here next to me, Tom in the middle, and then Julian at the back. So we're on good fettle. We're on day 24 now of the crossing. Actually, you've caught us at sort of a hot off the press moment because we've been absolutely flying, holding our sort of spot in the top 10 of the leaderboard, but the boat has hit a bit of a slow patch. So we're going to have to, as soon as we finish this call, we're going to have to dive in the water, believe it or not, and get underneath the boat and see what's the matter.
Well, Ollie, you know what they say, a bad workman always blames his tools.
Exactly. There come no excuses, right? Adapt for profit is our motto, so there we go.
So you've been there for 24 days, and the thing that me and Wilf couldn't believe last time we spoke, that you're doing everything there. So you're kind of eating, sleeping. It's literally just you guys on a boat. How has it been? How are you holding up? Because you're looking very well.
I mean, I'm looking like a garden gnome, aren't I? Really, let's be honest. But no, I mean, it's great. The morale's high. It is challenging. I'm not going to lie, especially with the heat. The last sort of 12 days, we've had 0 wind, which has made it really, really challenging just because it's then purely on the oars at that point. And it's about 30, 35 degrees during the day, so the sun is absolutely sweltering. So that makes it, life on board, pretty challenging. We work on a sort of shift rotation of 2 hours on, 2 hours off. So you can see at the moment that Stuart and Tom are on the oars now, so they'll do 2 hours. And then Julian and I will step on after them and do our 2 hours. It just carries on like that, non-stop chaining. And in between, in the downtime, you try and get a bit of sleep and you try and get your food in you, basically. So simple life, but simple struggle at the same time.
So, Ollie, where roughly are you at the moment? I mean, if you're 27 days in, what's the rough estimate of how long it'll take? Are you well past the halfway point or not?
Yeah, we're through halfway. We've got 1,100 miles to go. So we've crossed now about 1,300, 1,400 miles. So we're hoping to be in around between the sort of 23rd, 24th of January into Antigua. That's the hope. So there's still a little while to go yet, but everyone's still plugging along. And as you mentioned at the beginning, some of the causes that we're doing this for, Cure Parkinson's, motor neuron disease, and the Matt Hampson Foundation, I think when it gets a little bit tough, those things always come to the fore, and we just remind ourselves why we're out here on the water.
Yeah, so it's honestly, the charity fundraising is absolutely incredible. It really is. And you're talking there about the challenges on the water and the fact you're going to have to dive into the water to see what's going on with the boat after you stop talking to us. What's been the most challenging moment so far?
Aside from trying to hold a mobile phone and get the crew in the background at the same time and talk to you guys. I mean, the most challenging bit so far has been the heat. I think it's just been managing that and really trying to stay positive despite the fact that you're cooking in your cabin at each time. So managing that alongside the sleep deprivation, those have been the biggest things for the crew. But the spirits are really high. I'll be honest, we haven't really had many crosswords between us, which has been credit to us, and we're super proud of that and how well we're working together at the moment. But as you say, we still got, we're the 6th of January today, so we've still got the good sort of 18 days to go, really, before we can dream about a rum punch in Antigua.
Yeah, well, that does sound pretty good, but you've certainly earned it. And Ollie, we wish you and Tom and Stuart and Julian the very best with the rest of that journey. Stay safe, and congrats again on this amazing endeavour. We have loved looking at you, but I think you spoke to the team before, and you can flip the camera as we go. It is a beautiful sunrise.
I'll show you the sunrise now, yeah.
And thank you again.
Wow.
Fabulous stuff, and good luck with the rest of it. Safe onward journey, and we'll check in again if you'll have us.
Yeah, thanks very much. So lovely to see you both. Thanks for having us on the show, and obviously keep following us. Team Seas Life. You'll find out what's underneath the hull shortly.
Good luck with that. Thanks so much, Ollie, Tom and Stuart and Julian. We'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks, team. Thank you very much. Have a lovely morning.
That is absolutely amazing, I have to say. I think that's absolutely extraordinary, I really do. Credit to them as well. What a feat of endurance that is, and some really important charities they're raising money for as well.
We are going to quickly have a snapshot of what's going on in the Cabinet meeting, which of course is taking place today. The Prime Minister welcomed back his team for the start of the year, and we've just got some footage actually from inside.
Colleagues, let us make a start. And firstly, welcome to the first Cabinet meeting of the year. And I just want to say a few words because in 2026, thanks to the choices that we have already made, more people will begin to feel the change that we promised in their bills, in their communities, and in their health service. So despite the chaos that we inherited, you can already start to see the difference that a Labour government makes. By restoring economic stability, interest rates have fallen 6 times, helping homeowners with their mortgages. By investing in our NHS, with 5 million extra appointments, hospital waiting lists have fallen, meaning that patients are able to get on with their lives instead of waiting in agony for treatment. By getting more police patrolling our streets, violent crime has fallen, which means families can feel safer when they're out and about. Our challenge for this year is to prove that politics can deliver. And nowhere is this more important than when it comes to putting more money in people's pockets. And I know that so many families across the country are still worried about the cost of living. For most people, it's the single most important and the biggest issue that they are facing. And we are on their side. And yes, there's a world of uncertainty and upheaval, but tackling the cost of living remains and must remain our focus. We're helping families by taking £150 off average energy bills in April of this year. We're helping travellers by freezing rail fares for the first time in 30 years. We're helping parents by opening free breakfast clubs in 500 more schools in April, saving them £450 a year. We're helping workers by increasing the national living wage, worth £900 a year for millions of the lowest paid. So this will be an important year as we show that renewal is becoming reality and that Britain is turning the corner. Getting our country back on track is hard, difficult work, and we will reject the politics of easy answers and gimmicks that frankly got us here in the first place. At the next general election, we will be judged on whether we've delivered on the things that really matter. Do people feel better off? Are public services improving, for which they will look to the NHS? And do people feel more safe and secure in their own community? They are the issues we'll be judged on at the next general election, and that is our focus. That will require hard work, focus and determination from all of us. And together as a team, we'll rise to that challenge and deliver for the whole country.
Little clap at the end. It's quite unusual that, I have to say, a kind of televised broadcast at the beginning of Cabinet, and you've got to read into that for the fact that he wants to make a point for viewers at home, for all of us to hear, which is tackling the cost of living will remain our focus, whatever's happening around the world. I should say as well that, I'm picking up kind of increasing uneasiness among Labour MPs who are worried that Keir Starmer's spending too much time on international affairs, it's domestic affairs, cost of living that is going to determine the election. So perhaps it's a attempt to try and do that.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because you wonder, my thought was, who's this for? I mean, it was unusual. It was a bit weird because, as you said, we don't usually have the camera inside a meeting that's meant to be private for cabinet ministers. He was clearly reading a script. He was mixing, trying to look at the script and people around the table, but also down the barrel of a camera that's been inserted to be in there, which is obviously for our purposes, and there was a pooled camera for everyone. It was just a bit weird.
He's trying to get the domestic message across. And I'll be honest, it's not easy at the minute with what is going on elsewhere, Venezuela, Greenland, you've got the Ukraine meeting today as well. But I feel like it is one of those things that's going to determine his future and also, of course, the government as well, if you can get that domestic messaging across.
Well, of course, central to that was, of course, the cost of living. And let's talk a little bit more about those pressures in 2026 with Faith Archer, the personal finance expert who joins us now. Faith, very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. I mean, I guess as we start the year, there should be better news or less bad news when it comes to the cost of living in the year ahead.
Well, you would always hope so. And most people are fired up at the start of the year with financial resolutions to try and take a better handle on their money and help manage the increases to the cost of living.
Yeah, I guess, but more broadly, if we look at the forecasts at the start of the year, people do think inflation should keep falling and they do think that the interest rates could come down a bit more.
Certainly, you would hope that both things would come down, yes.
In terms of some of the other kind of tips for people as they do start the year, we obviously had quite a lot of changes as well in the budget. What are the number one, number two tips you have for people at home as we start the year?
I think a lot of people, if you want to have some kind of buffer to cope with cost of living issues, then encouraging people to save and take advantage of the individual savings account allowances. The fact that there was a lot of concern that the cash limit was going to be cut, and that isn't taking place for the under 65s for a couple of years. So you've still got £20,000 a year to invest in cash. If you've got longer timeframes for your money, then the government is encouraging us to consider investing, and that can make the most of our money. And also pensions, longer term, if you possibly can spare the money to take advantage. There's a maximum £60,000 a year pension allowance for most people that will be boosted with free money from tax relief and employer contributions if you're a member of a workplace scheme.
And do you think that the changes that we saw in the budget are encouraging people to do the right things in that regard? Because we did see changes to the salary sacrifice schemes and things like that.
Again, the salary sacrifice changes are not taking place for a couple of years. So anybody who can take advantage of those changes, can take advantage of salary sacrifice while it still exists, do so. And it will continue existing, just with limits. Most of the changes in the budgets were aimed at making tax changes supported by the people with the broadest shoulders. And so for people for whom, example, inheritance tax is an issue, then you may well need to take action now for changes that are going to happen in a couple of years. And I know there have been changes. A lot of people actually, when they get access to their pension money, withdrawing larger lump sums, giving it away to younger generations to avoid inheritance tax issues further down the line.
Faith, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Faith Archer, discussing some of the personal finance recommendations for the year ahead.
Coming up, we are going to be talking football because it has been a bad year so far in 2026, only 6 days of it. And if you are a Premier League manager, because we've lost not one but two, so we're going to be talking to football reporter Don Smith about the sacking of Man U manager and also what's happening at Chelsea as well.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it. As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you? People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Right, let's talk football now, because we've lost not one, but two Premier League managers in 2026. We're only 6 days into the year as well, so it's not a great track record for them. We're joined by the football reporter for The Standard, Don Smith. Good to have you with us. What's going on?
Plenty is going on, is the answer to that. Yeah, a very, very busy beginning to 2026 with, Chelsea and Manchester United changing head coach, in the first 6 or so days of the year.
I mean, the kind of headline for me is both of them in November, fans and, results were quite positive, weren't they, towards the managers? It was a quick kind of demise.
Yeah, but that's increasingly what happens in football these days. I mean, when Enzo Maresca departed on New Year's Day from the Chelsea job, he was the reigning Premier League manager of the month. And Ruben Amorim was he was he'd only been photoed with the trophy 20 days before. And Ruben Amorim was the one who won it the month before that. So that just kind
don't win that. That's it. Don't get that trophy.
No,
it's like
no.
That's the. Well, if you're a Premier League manager watching this, say no.
The award is called Manager of the Month, but I feel like it should be renamed Head Coach of the Month, because this kind of dilution of that role, I think, is kind of what has spelt the end for Maresca and also for Amorim, because back in the day, particularly Sir Alex Ferguson's time, a manager would be kind of in charge of most of the stuff, of the decisions at the club. These days, quite often the model is that a club wants a manager to be a head coach, to take control of the team and very little else.
So you're referring obviously to the way in which particularly Ruben Amorim, the outgoing Manchester United manager, was moaning about whether he had control over transfers and more than just the tactics. And that was one of the reasons for the breakdown in relations with the owners. But is it fair to really suggest that was why he left? And is that not part of potentially a strategy that he deployed to get himself fired, get his payout, as opposed to allow these results to continue to disappoint? I mean, his performance on the pitch was not good.
Yeah, and I have to accept that, we have to accept that in his press conference after the Leeds game at the weekend, when he said, I was hired to be the manager, not the head coach, that isn't true. His job title is head coach. When he was sacked and the statement came out on Monday, it said, we've parted with head coach Ruben Amorim. But yeah, maybe it is a ploy that he wanted more power. I do also think that the power he was given has waned in recent days, and I think that led to a fallout with the club's hierarchy on Friday. But yeah, results have been very bad. I think his win percentage is 32%, and although this is not the best Man United team we've seen, to win less than a third of your games is terrible, and you're not going to be the sustainable answer to Man United's problems if you are winning less than a third of matches.
I'm interested in the kind of turnover that we're seeing, because it does feel like, back in the day, but people used to be given a bit longer to prove themselves, to go through rough patches, to bring in new players and to bed them in, all that kind of stuff. And fans are more impatient these days. Do you think it's fair?
Yeah, I think fans are more impatient, but I also think that, if we keep changing, there is the worry that everything's going to feel the same. Particularly, I feel like that's the case lower in the Premier League table. The teams that are really struggling, you see them always hiring and firing the same head coaches, and it makes you wonder how much of a difference a head coach really does make, especially in an era when there is this turnover. But then look at Aston Villa and Unai Emery, who could well be the sort of manager that Manchester United, certainly he's the sort of manager they would like to hire. Whether he would be willing to do it is another matter, or whether it would be cost effective. But he is someone who has genuinely improved his players at Aston Villa. So it does exist, but you're right. It doesn't feel that managers are given the time that they were once upon a time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the fans are impatient, the owners are impatient, and I guess that brings me to Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who came in with much fanfare to take over the leadership of Manchester United after the Glazers were very clearly blamed for the era beforehand. But even if Ruben Amorim didn't have a great track record on the pitch, increasingly you have to say that Ratcliffe has not had a good track record in the boardroom.
Yeah, and increasingly football clubs are employing so many heads of recruitment, directors of football, sporting directors, people on really big wage packets whose primary job is to sign the right players. And Ruben Amorim said last season, this is the worst squad that Manchester United have ever had. How is that in the club's interest? It's not in the interest. But it is true, it isn't as good a squad as they have had. But in the summer, they signed genuine, proven quality from the Premier League. They signed Mateus Cunha from Wolves. They signed Brian Mbeumo from Brentford. These are genuinely good players, and they've had decent starts to the season. But, you know, to then have won 32% at the end of your reign, that is why it has spelt the end for Amorim. But yes, they need to recruit more smartly. No one could argue otherwise, I think, at Manchester United.
Dom, thanks so much for joining us. Great conversation.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
I just want to bring you some news from Switzerland this morning, and this is the awful fire that we saw on New Year's Eve in the bar that happened, the fire at the bar that killed so many people and injured 116 as well, because what the news that we got through now is that no safety inspections were done at the bar where that fire happened for 5 years. That's according to the mayor. No safety inspections for 5 years. And he said that he regretted bitterly that those checks didn't happen. We've also had news through, of course, about the number of people dying as well. 40 people dying, the youngest 14 years old, 116 injured, and that fire at the Crans Montana bar starting at around 1:30 a.m. on New Year's Day.
Tragic story, every ongoing development reminding us of that tragedy. We're going to have a quick look at the weather now.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
It'll be cold all week with further wintry hazards and the possibility of more widespread snow and coastal gales towards the weekend. Snow and ice warnings have been issued with another amber covering of warning for northern Scotland today. Expect an extra 5 to 10 centimetres of snow there. And there's widespread, locally severe frost now, bringing icy stretches. Scotland Island and Northern Ireland will see rain, sleet and mainly hill snow taking over this morning, while England and Wales look generally fine.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
There's a lot of heavy news today. There's a lot of serious news. So we thought we'd end with a couple of the gorgeous pictures you've sent us in of the snow, including this one from Gillian. So this is Julian's poodle, Monty Gray, I should say, who is looking absolutely resplendent in the snow there.
We've got. Did we specifically request dogs in the snow today? Because we've got a lot.
I think we made a comment about dogs.
We made a comment, and we've got a lot, which is great.
You've delivered, and thank you.
So Kevin sent us a picture of Sully. Where's Sully? In the snow.
Santa beard. Lovely.
Very sweet indeed. And then we've also got Buddy, who's having a kickabout in Hertfordshire.
He's got his little snow vest on as well. It's looking very nice and warm.
And a nice colourful ball as well. Fantastic pictures that we've had throughout the day. And again, stay safe in the snow, but enjoy it if you can.
Yeah, lots of snow, lots of disruption, lots of rail closures, road chaos, school closures. But oh my goodness me, there have been some beautiful dog pictures as well.
Certainly have. We have got an action-packed day, of course, to come on Sky News today. Gareth Barlow will be picking up next with particular focus on that Coalition of the Willing meeting in Paris.
We'll see you tomorrow.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Big Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us?
Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office.
Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.